Good morning. How are you this morning? Well, I lost my voice last night, so I don't know if that's a sign of a good night or a very bad night. Depends on a point of view. So how's the energy level in the room? You're sleepy, you're energetic, ready for a next day. Please don't let yourself to be fooled by the weather. The rain is coming. By lunchtime, it's going to be terrible. So I'd like to say enjoy the sun in the black box inside. So that's the way it is. So we've been talking about the role of culture and heritage in the digital era, the entire day. By the way, you know, there is this story we often say here in Estonia about our digital past. I don't know if you know this story that when in Britain, when in England they were excavating and they were building a house and they did some excavations and they found cables underground, very, very deep. So the scientists concluded that already in ancient times, English had telephones. And then in Germany, they were building a house and they found even deeper level. They found fiberglass. So they concluded that even in ancient times, Germans had fiber optics. And here in Estonia, when they were building this magnificent building, they were digging and 10 and 20, 30, 50, 100 meters. They found nothing. They concluded that already in ancient times, Estonians had wireless. So digital is something very close to our heart. Anyway, before we start with the next session, it's going to be interesting. Having looked at already the presentations and bios of the next session speakers, I would like to invite here quickly one person from each workshop yesterday, just to give us very short overview of what happened there, what were the main takeaways from these discussions. So can I ask from the first group, someone to come here? Yes, Yvette.
Thank you very much. Yes, our group was about audience engagement and, had very good input from Ashej Hoffman and Pille Runen. Thank you very much, and the group. And the first question really was, if this particular museum has 200,000 visitors, what's the problem? People are coming. And we talked about, but the important thing is, why are people coming and will they come again? What is the engagement of people? And then we talked about what's the real purpose, the current real purpose of museums. And we looked very much at museums as building citizenship and democracy. So if that is the why, the engagement has to be very focused. So we looked at a very interesting phrase that citizens are shifting from being knowledge givers to meaning makers. And so the engagement is much more about meaning, and that was very powerful. So then we looked at the how does this work, and what can governments do to help it? And the first thing we decided was leadership was a very important element, and leadership that could look at things like guidance, look at voluntary data sharing and data collecting, and we had this phrase, giving to learn. So if institutions give their data voluntarily, they give it for a reason, which is that ministries can take an overview, create a benchmarking, anonymized benchmarking, and give back institutions the information about how they are performing benchmarked against other institutions. This is an important leadership role that governments can play. The other role that we talked about was how ministries can link with each other, education and culture, information, and form policies that can influence and help institutions. And this is something that can't be done by the institutions. Governments can support institutions to refocus and reshape the way they work, sharing best practice models. They can help stimulate the sense of diversity and access to diverse groups through collaboration and putting them in touch with other organizations. And they can also understand and communicate the global context within which they work. The fourth area was we looked at barriers. What are the barriers to growth? There were, particularly in Estonia, there was a discussion about the political sensitivities, how to look at the recent past, looking at appropriation of culture, and how to avoid the blandness of avoidance of those big issues. Blandness will create alienation from audiences. So there has to be a bravery and a risk-taking. The other barriers were fear of disclosure of information and fear of competition, and a very interesting discussion on the incompatibility of the interface of the museum to its public. That was quite an interesting discussion, how museums and institutions work 9 to 5, the public come home from work, get on the internet at 10 o'clock at night. There needs to be much more of a compatibility of interface. Museums and other institutions work in compartments. The public want to know a question. Can you show me more about this object or give me a story about it? And if the public just it goes to info@museum.com, nothing comes back. So how can institutions change their relationship with the public? There's a risk aversity in institutions that is incompatible. Planning cycles don't fit in with what small organizations are doing. Hard to reach groups still find it hard to reach museums. However, museums are a great space for people to meet in. And finally, we looked at sustainability, the need for better measurement of impacts and evaluation, and the need to adapt and make more alliances with the health sector, the private sector, schools, and to become more entrepreneurial. But really, this place is doing a fine job.
Wonderful. Thank you, Yvette. Yeah, I heard the word risk aversity. This is something that we discussed in our group as well. And you also mentioned about assessment of impact. And this is something that this panel will discuss. So there is going to be a good bridge to that. So, digital challenge. Siim.
Well, thank you, and good morning from my side as well. And once again, as a head of the National Heritage Board, I would like to say once again how happy I am to see you all in Estonia and visiting us and in Tartu. But to the workshop that we had yesterday about the Digital Solution Challenge, we had two presentations, one from Susanna Stanska and the other one from this house, from Kristel Rattus. And we discussed how to make IT solutions work, or how to create IT solutions that work for us and for our audiences. And what came up from Susanna's presentation is very basic, very trivial, but this is where we usually make mistakes. We need to answer two important questions. First is why, meaning what is the vision of any information technology solution? And secondly, to whom, or who is the audience for whom we're making all those solutions? And if we fail to answer those two questions in an adequate way, we most probably make mistakes in further codes, programming, marketing, and other activities. And Lars from Sweden said something what made me think very much about how we do and what we do in the National Heritage Board is that digital should be a dimension in everything. So there should be no difference when we build up our processes and systems either offline or online. It all should be one because we're living in this digital era. And from Kristel's presentation, I guess there is 3 points that I picked up and which are very important when the systems are, or exhibition like that is ready already, is that we have to think about the further maintenance of any information system, who will do that and how much it will cost. Secondly, interactivity from the audience. We had a very good response that interactivity can be built either into information systems or into exhibitions with the help of social media, meaning that we don't only have to do the touchscreens and displays digitally, but also involve people in social media. And a third aspect that we discussed also heavily was technology. We, as heritage or memory professionals, don't really know how to make the technology choices, but at a certain point in any development we have to make those choices. So what we can depend on is good advice, and who else would be the best advisors as our colleagues. So please, even after this conference is over, contact each other, find each other solutions and learn from each other, because the technology changes so fast. It becomes obsolete so fast, and also the hypes go over. So let's make the solutions that last longer than technology hypes, and sharing experiences should be something that we do both in online cases and offline cases. Thank you.
Aitäh. The third workshop, Community Challenge. Harry.
Yes. Thank you. Could I have the slides up? Wonderful. Clicker here? Great. Yeah. So we had a wonderful group, and we've been led by Marilyn. Marilyn, where are you? Is she in there? Organizing. Well, Marilyn is fantastic. She led us through a very transformative experience. We entered the room as librarians, curators, Dutchmen, Romanians, and we left as designers, as anthropologists, as Estonians, I would say. And I'm not joking. I think this Rina from the museum here introduced us to a pretty substantial problem that they're facing. She needs to set up an exhibition which covers a very difficult area in the history of this country, the Soviet area. And one of the things that she's struggling with is that there's a large influx of Russian people into Estonia, as I understand it. And I realize I will generally or grossly generalize here, and I won't do justice to all the intricacies of the problem. But even just looking at these numbers, you can understand that that is quite a substantial issue. There are Russian people, there are people from Estonia deported to Russia, and there are emigres to other countries. And if you want to reflect on that as a museum, you need to be able to be in touch with these communities. So what we did is we started immediately mind mapping the issues, and we came to three big areas that we needed to investigate. So there was a lack of trust in general from some of these groups. Are these people from this museum really going to tell our story in a genuine way? Can we trust them to do that? Perhaps there was also a lack of urgency and relevance in certain cases. Well, why would I give you the letters from my grandfather from this very difficult period? Why would that be important for a museum? And there's also a lack of understanding in general. What are you exactly trying to do? So as designers, we started digging into these groups. So we started to become anthropologists. And this empathy map shows where we think we might have issues. We can't, if we just tell people in Narval, which I understand has a very big Russian emigre population, if we just go out there and say, hey, can you give us some interesting stuff to put in the museum here, maybe that won't be sufficient. So, because these are the types of things that these people see, feel, do, and hear. So there's a pain out there. Maybe they still feel a bit stranger in this country, not feeling completely accepted. And maybe the gain that we can bring is maybe we can make them feel better understood. So we started then investigating and playing around with what kind of change path can we follow to get better at this. So if we see at the end the impact we want to have, an increased sense of trust, an increased sense of relevance, maybe a deeper understanding of why these things are also relevant to them, then what are the types of actions that we can undertake? And we started thinking about finding local ambassadors to help us there. They will probably have more credibility than we have as a museum. And maybe form partnerships with the Russian museums to also help us collect this material. So this is just to give you an idea. I think we'd love to explore this a lot more. But for now, this is what we left the room with. Thank you, and thank you, group. This was great.
Wonderful. And the fourth group, we had the Innovation Challenge. Anu-Maija. Where is Anu-Maija? Oh, here.
Thank you, Ragnar. Good morning to everybody. Thank you for everybody for this wonderful atmosphere that you've been creating, because yesterday we had a rather fruitful discussion in our room. We didn't want to leave our room. So we were discussing about entrepreneurial and innovation potential in cultural heritage institutions. And of course, first we started with giving a meaning for innovation in order to avoid innovating for innovation's sake. Still, it's a nice word we use quite often, and sometimes without giving a meaning for it. So we just started to share our thoughts. What do we mean? Is it creating the more interesting content? Is it providing the digital solutions? Is it focusing on accessibility and usability? Or is it telling the new stories, giving new meanings for existing things or thoughts? Or do we want to provide something unexpected? Or we are searching for new perspectives, new challenges? And then, based on a very good case study or example of a project that the Estonian National Museum has at the moment regarding the food culture, we are talking about the multidisciplinary approaches and projects and initiatives as well. So I think we almost all agreed that we need to put the audience in the center of the world. By audience, we mean users, clients, but also non-users. We must know them, where they are, who they are. We must listen to them and involve them in our innovation processes. We must have a dream or a goal in order to innovate or do things in a new way and generate new solutions. And the easiest way to start is to start experimenting instead of constantly planning and thinking about the institutions and structures that maybe do not allow us to carry on with our ideas. There are several tools available. The easiest ones, and also that was demonstrated, is the design thinking tools that actually help to pilot, to validate your ideas or solutions with your clients or customers, and maybe then fail fast, but fail forward. This is the startup thinking that is needed in order to get forward. And you must feel the pain within your institution or organization, but more important, you must feel the pain of your audience, of your users and non-users, what they want. Take the risks and invest in your people, because there is a lots of knowledge, creativity, and entrepreneurial spirit in your people. They do have startup mindset, and it's all about your people, so you can just do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Fail fast, but fail forward. Thank you. And this is an absolutely right moment to continue with the next session, because the next session will talk about many of the same issues. I'm going to give you all to very able hands of Raivo Ruusalep from the National Library.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. So to continue from yesterday, I'm a historian, who has worked at the archives and now works at the library. And I'm interested in preservation. So, aha. But I think this is something that you will discover with many of your users as well, that once you scratch the surface, they're not anonymous users. There are lots of interests there. And when we talk about reaching out to the communities, people that we see in those communities will identify with those communities on different levels. It's not only about where they work or how they want to present themselves at the party. It's most often their interests and hobbies that determine that. So if you were thinking of catching up on some sleep that you need after last night, then please don't. We have a very interesting session starting just now. Yesterday morning we painted the bright future of where cultural heritage sector is going. By the end of the afternoon, you all were left feeling, yes, I want to do this. We can do this. So today we're looking a little bit into how we're going to do this, or how ready we are for that. So perhaps capacities is the key word that I would pick out from the title of this session. And to start it off, we have Professor Seamus Ross, who's been running Digital Humanities Centre at the University of Glasgow for many years, then went to become a Dean of iSchool at the University of Toronto, and right now is teaching at the university in Athens. So please, Seamus, first 20 minutes are yours.
Thank you very much, Raivo. Welcome, everyone. It's a delight to be here. I have to say, I understand why it rains here so much. It's because when the sun comes out and it shines on those green leaves, it's beauty beyond anything you can imagine. It's absolutely lovely to be in Estonia. I'm from, as Raivo said, I'm from an iSchool. We focus on the relationship between people, technology, and content in the areas predominantly of archives, museums, and libraries, but also in knowledge management within companies as well. And our goal is to help our students to be able to understand how they can use technology to improve the access to content by people, how they can better understand content and use it more effectively to shape the content, to make it more amenable to technological analysis and use by people, and also to understand people and how they actually function and what their needs are out of technology and content. And so when I think about innovation, I think about trying to understand the people, the content, which might be a variety of different cultural heritage spaces, libraries, museums, archives. And I think about how we can understand different kinds of technology. And I don't want you just to think about technology as digital. I walked around the museum yesterday and I saw a wonderful couple about my age bending down over a broken pot and putting it back together. It was actually a wonderful interactive exhibit that allowed them to understand how the pots were constructed, but also to understand the work of an archaeologist or a restorer in a museum, which gave them a new window on the cultural heritage. So for the next 18 minutes or so, I'm going to look at innovation and various aspects of it. And I'm hoping to leave you with a number of thoughts about it. First of all, I think we need to understand that innovation involves creativity, but it also involves implementation of that creativity into usable products or usable services or new methods and ways of thinking. It often serves an unmet need. In fact, frequently it serves an unimagined need. I remember the days before Google. I never imagined I was going to need it. I use it every day, all the time. It also generates value. But, as we've heard from a number of speakers, it requires capacity. That is, what is your institutional capacity for innovation? It requires understanding of users and non-users, and also understanding your content, and imagining the different kinds of technologies that might emerge or might be available to you. And risk-taking. You have to take risks. I'm going to use 6 examples, but I'm also going to very briefly, I have a lot of slides here. I'm not going to talk to them all, but I want you to be able to have them and take them away, because I've pointed to a lot of the very recent literature in the last 12 months that's come out of the European Commission, EU projects, and it's just phenomenal the amount of interest there is in the cultural heritage and the high quality of some of these reports. And if you're not familiar with them, I just want to call your attention to them. And I'm going to conclude with a couple of words about education and about the layering in the cultural heritage. We heard a lot about the cultural heritage yesterday, and in particular about it as a non-renewable common good. But most of the examples we've looked at so far have come from the museum sector. And I just want to remind you that the cultural heritage is very broad. It includes landscapes, so spaces, old ruins, archaeological sites. It includes objects, paintings, the pot I mentioned upstairs, and it includes cultural practices such as cooking and rituals and so forth. So when you think about the cultural heritage and you think about areas you can innovate, you need to think very, very broadly. And that Council of Europe report that came out in February is exceptionally good on that. Creativity and innovation, very, very key to all this. And it's about not just what you can innovate with the tangible, but it's how you can innovate with the intangible. And there's a wonderful exhibition upstairs here about cooking, and about the different ways cooking is used and instantiated in Estonian society and has been over time. That's intangible heritage, given resonance to the public in that sort of thing. But that exhibition about cooking creates a dialogue, and that's one of the most important things you can take away when you think about cultural heritage and innovation, how you're going to create social dialogue. We will talk a little bit about economic things, but other areas that cultural heritage plays a role in is education, employment, and tourism. And tourism has long been one of the big justifications for utilizing the cultural heritage and for expressing it in digital forms. But Mark O'Neill, who was a keeper of the Kelvin Grove at Glasgow, where I was for a number of years, as Raivo mentioned, once walked out of the Kelvin Grove and walked across the street, and he noticed that the Kelvin Grove was based in a big ethnic community, but he never saw them in his museum. So he went out to ask them why they didn't come. They told him they didn't have anything for them. And so he went back and he put together some exhibitions particularly designed to help draw in the Indian and Bangladeshi and Pakistani communities that lived in that area. And the important thing there is that these are exhibitions, as Jaffrey has pointed out in a new analysis of the Kelvin Grove, these are exhibitions that are about creating interactive sociality, things that communication between people that takes place in the museum and then extends outside the museum. That's innovation. Another one that you're probably familiar with is Ancestry. Ancestry is a huge company now. It started out very small, about almost 30 years ago, maybe 25 years ago. And that's very important because when you think about innovation in the cultural heritage, you need to think long term. Don't just think about what you're going to do and rewards you're going to get in the next 2 to 5 years. Think long term. They're an aggregator. They don't own a lot of content. They buy up some, but they lease a lot of content or get into arrangements where they can link to content. And using that content, they've engaged millions of users to create family trees, bring those back into the Ancestry's data set, and even to contribute scanned photographs, documents, and to build up profiles. And so this is a co-production process. They've engaged their users. They focus on adding content, but their big focus is actually on getting their users to use the content effectively and supporting the user base. So they put as much money, it appears, there's a huge amount of information about this company from the SEC filings, Security and Exchange Commission filings in the US. They put as much money, it appears, into marketing and user support as they do into content generation. So that's a very important thing. Innovations need to have user support, and they need to, you need to engage in marketing. So the lessons here were, you need to invest in technology, content, and user experiences. So when they invest in user experiences, they're constantly adding new tools to allow users to do new things with the content, and also to do old things more effectively. They also recognize that when you have a captured audience and a core set of services that excite them, then you can add ancillary services. So they've added Ancestry.dna as an example of it, or Find a Grave. So they've added additional services on top of it. Their content, you see in the last 8 years, has grown dramatically from 1 billion records to 20 billion records. They use a subscription model, very, very effective. In fact, at one point, they bought out another company for $100 million. They didn't buy it out for the content, they bought it out for the 400,000 subscribers, I believe. Another area that's very important in Europe is migration, immigrants. And I picked the Carla Maria Martini archive in Milan for 2 reasons. One, because Carlo Martini left a lot of material, but a lot of records, but many of his records he never collected. And so the archive is communicating with people in Milan, where he was archbishop from 1980 to 2002, and then a cardinal, to get them to make available recordings, videos, photographs, letters that he sent to them, so they can be scanned and brought into the archive. In other words, it's a community activity to build the archive of Martini. There's an innovation that's going on. Martini was very interested in social cohesion, focused on the problem of migration and by default citizenship as well. And much of his work went into policy making. So the archive will help us to understand policy making, but will also allow us to contribute to some understanding of social cohesion. So social cohesion. That's another great area for innovation, in the intercultural dialogue, and that came up in this really wonderful OMC report that looks at cultural diversity as an asset. But if you have cultural diversity and you see it as an asset, you have to allow people to develop an understanding and respect for it. And that's one of the areas that especially archives and libraries can play a core role in. But you can think more broadly. As you do here, you have a wonderful song contest. Songs, rituals, food, oral traditions, festivals, they all play a very important role in helping us to develop social cohesion by enabling us to understand through narrative creation and storytelling the lives of others. Identity. The European Holocaust Research Initiative research infrastructure project, which is funded by the European Commission, focuses on helping us to understand and reconstruct identities by linking together multiple archives across Eastern, Western Europe, and beyond that hold records of the Holocaust. One of the key players in the project, Chaim Gertner from the Yad Vashem, I saw him give a presentation a couple of years ago where he was able to use the records of many of these institutions to construct the identity and life of one individual who was otherwise unknown and lost. So the power of archives and the power of the engagement of people in the reconstruction of identity is another area where you can have a lot of social innovation with archives. Integration, linking, really it's a wonderful opportunity. But we've seen innovations in access to archaeology, for example, in many cultural heritage projects. But I picked this one, Epoch, which was a network of excellence, because their innovations were actually on the technological side. They looked at how they could improve imaging of 3D objects and they built some tools to do that. They looked at how they could improve recording on archaeological sites, and they built tools to do that. They looked at how they could make virtual reconstructions that would allow you to understand aspects of history that otherwise you wouldn't be able to see if you didn't have a reconstruction of the environment, and be able to look at it from different perspectives, such as battlefield archaeology, for example. And they did much to improve research capacity within the sector. So innovations can result in commercializable products, but they can also result in improved research capacity, improved public understanding and access, which in turn helps us to understand better. Now, there is another technology that I think I would just like to allude to very briefly, and it's blockchain. Blockchain is a distributed ledger technology. It underpins Bitcoin. It's very interesting because in the art domain, now I took that picture in Glasgow. It's about as rainy as Estonia. Sometimes we have to get the sunshine on that was a stroke of luck. And I registered that picture yesterday with a Scribe, which is a art registration site. Now, I want you to imagine that that was a digital work of art, and I told you that I produced 10 editions of it, and I sold 10 of them to you. How would you know that you didn't own the 11th copy, that you actually owned an authentic original? Using the blockchain technology, it's possible to register a digital object in a way that a purchaser or owner can validate that the copy or edition that they have is what it purports to be. Now, it's a long story about this, but this is a technology that will transform the way we can share the digital heritage, we can document, we can produce content, and we can make sure that it has provenance and authenticity. And so I encourage you to take a look at that as an innovation space. So this is a wonderful audience report that came out, and I'm not going to, I'm going to pick one point from it for time here, and it's that it stresses the fact that we need to work with audiences rather than for them. And that goes back to that co-production. And future innovation is going to be about working with people. It's also going to be focused on the concept of service design. So you need to, for service design, you need to know your resources, you need to know your users and your non-users, in other words, those people who might discover you by surprise rather than by habit or choice. And you need to promote services that allow people to generate content and use that content in new ways. This is exactly what Ancestry has done so effectively in building up its global user base. It's a service by design model. And I think that when you're thinking about innovations, think service by design. Now, we often hear people talk about return on investment, and they put it in an economic sense. And so the British Library in the 1990s, I think it was, they produced a report that said, for every £1 invested in libraries, it returns £4.40. Toronto Public Library produced a similar thing in 2013. One of the graduates of my program did that. And that showed that the Toronto Library generated $5.63 for every dollar. I really, really think we need better measures of value than these. These are not measures of value that resonate with me. The Toronto Public Library, Toronto is a city of immigrants. Toronto Public Library's greatest contribution is in the area of building social cohesion, inter-community dialogues, and helping immigrants to integrate into society. When we talk about the role of libraries and the role of archives and museums, cultural heritage more generally, let's talk about it in the social values, not just trying to get return on income and investment. Now, one of our colleagues here pointed out to me, that's the only thing that politicians really understand, is money. We need to change the story. We need to up our game, and we need to convince them that they need to think about the world differently. So we need to do a lot more work in assessing value, and I think looking at some of the areas listed, the natural heritage as an area for assessing value, because they have very good metrics and tools, and I encourage you to consider that as a way. Finance options. Great OMC report that looks at finance options and crowdsourcing and other kinds of models, not just going to those politicians and asking them for money for the cultural, to support initiatives in the cultural creative sector. And the other big problem has to do with output, outcome, and impact measures. Marco's here, Denit, he ran Numerate and enumerate, and since the Lund principles were first established in 1999, 2000, they did a great job with successive ways counting the numbers of objects that were digitized and so forth. We need to know more about the outcomes that came from those digitizations and more about the impact they had. Yes, you can count up the miles of road you paved between here and Tallinn. You can get the outcome measures that it's safer to drive, you get there more quickly. But what about the impact, the benefits, the health benefits, the benefits to families and so forth? Those are the sorts of things we need to be talking about in the cultural heritage. We do a lot. We don't communicate it very well, as the British Academy showed in a report from 2005. We need to communicate better. We need to report what we do and talk about it more positively in the stories. We need new kinds of professionals. You as a community, you need to discuss what competencies you expect people to have, and you need to engage us as educators to help us develop experimental and experiential programs that allow our students to provide you with the abilities that you require in the future. So we have some consensus that social innovation has to embrace new communities. We have to create new kinds of interactions. Economic innovation, we need to use new financial business models to actually get ourselves going. And we need to have new ways to reach our audiences. We need to recognize and applaud risk-taking in our community. So finally, there's a layered approach to innovation. You need to have a conceptualization and planning layer. You need to have an action layer. Then we need to improve the measurement layer. And finally, in the communication and reporting layer, we need to do a lot more work. And one area that we could do some work in would be in creating a registry of initiatives in the cultural heritage more broadly that looked at what the initiatives' objectives were and how what outputs it produced, what outcomes it did, and how it was measuring its impact. We have a lot to offer society, and we need to change the way we tell our story so that it's not all reduced to an economic one, and so that we can contribute to social inclusion, social cohesion, and innovation more generally. Thank you very much.
Very good. Stay here for some questions. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. I can see a little problem in what you're saying, Seamus. You seem to suggest that we're already doing a lot of it, and then we need to develop better methods for measuring it, just so we can show that we're already all doing it, and just, then we can sneak away and say, well, we're already doing a lot, we don't need to do more. Is that a danger that you see there?
No, it's a good question, though. I don't actually see it. I see a very rich sector, an intellectually rich sector, emotionally rich sector that really wants to expose its cultural content to a broad audience, and also wants to use that in positive ways, whether it's in economic generation as an ancestry, which also has very positive social impact because people understand their heritage and so forth, but also who want to do things with social inclusion and better understanding of where we came from and where we're going.
Okay, thank you. Any questions to Seamus? You have to wave your hand, because if you just raise it, I can't see it from here. So, is anyone frantically waving there? Not at the moment, but then thank you again.
Thanks.
And I call on stage our panel. It just so happens that it's arranged alphabetically. On the program that you received in your folder, one name has disappeared from the originally announced program, but we're Estonians, we go the extra mile. We have organized a speaker from Estonia. This is Jaanus. Please come on stage. Jaanus runs a quarter, I don't know, how do you call it in English? Telliskivi Creative City, a big and a little bit older sister of the quarter where we were yesterday in Tallinn. So this is letter E, Estonia. From Finland, F, we have Minna from the Ministry of Culture, who's going to represent Libraries View today. Please take a seat. So G for Georgia, we have David, who runs the National Museum there. And finally, H for Holland, we have Harry, who is Mr. Europeana. And we're going to start in the reverse order, starting from letter H. So Harry will go first. So each of the panelists will have a little slideshow, and then we'll follow it with discussion. But obviously, you can pose questions to them immediately after they talk. Thank you.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yes. Where is Seamus sitting here? Ah, you're sitting there. You think you can now retire in your seat, right? Yeah, I think many of the things that you say I will applaud and amplify. So I'll start with applauding you. Fantastic speech. I think this quote, which you will probably recognize as being from Jean Monnet, which was one of the founding fathers of this beautiful European Union, which was started as an economic endeavor, allegedly said this: if I were to start anew, I would start from culture. And I think that's something that startup business models will also tell you. If you can't cement a good social dynamic in your organization, you can have a great idea, but your business is probably going to fail. And I think that's something that we're now learning as an industry here as well, and as a European Union. So I'm completely with you, Seamus, on the social side. I think Heritage 3.0, as we've started learning about yesterday, gives us a fantastic invitation to recast ourselves as who we really are. We've been challenged to become businessmen for the past 10 years. We've experimented with it, and I think it's really fair to say, it's to conclude, it's not in our DNA. We're not business people. We're not here to sell stuff. However, I think there's great economic impact to be had if we focus on the things that we're really good at, and that is the social aspect. That's what we started out for. We didn't start a museum to make money. We made a museum because of the aesthetics of it, of the beauty of being challenged in our ideas. So I think that's really what I want to say. You already said it, I think. We already have impact. We just don't know about it. I'm quoting here the report from the British Library that you also mentioned. The British Library says, every pound you put into our organization will get you £4.40 back. Now that is built up, of course, it's composed of many different elements. You might be interested to know that the most important element, over 50% of this, is value that people attribute to the British Library merely existing. It's asking people on the street, do you ever go to the British Library? Probably not. Do you mind if the British Library is being torn down tomorrow? Yes, I would. That would be horrible. I get a great sense of prestige, and I want to know that there is a place where my children know that there is a legacy for them waiting for the later years. So that, I think, is a type of economic impact that we can certainly harness. But it starts with access. I think this is what we've been struggling with for the past 10, 15 years. We are institutions. Our main task is to safeguard material, make it available. Now, how are we doing there? The enumerate survey from 2015, and there's a new one coming up, tells us that only 2% of what we've digitized so far can be used on social media. Now, what kind of a return of investment is that, do you think, in Heritage 3.0? This is the big iceberg of material that we have, and there's 10% digitized. Only 2% of that is actually available for people to use in a social context. And I think that is horrible, and that is the first thing we need to do something about. But as already been said, it's not about the outputs. You can have as much stuff out there as you want. If you keep on limiting your horizon over there, then you're not doing a job, I think is what we're learning. What we want is to make sure that the resources we invest lead to activities that lead to outputs that actually lead to impact in the long run. Now here there's a little thing to think about. If we want to recast ourselves as something different, where can we find examples of industries that have done that? And there's one example that really comes to mind for me, and I'm a sucker for these things. As a Dutchman, of course, I ride a bicycle. 10 years ago, bicycle business was going this way. Why was that? It was because people in Holland used the bicycle to go from A to B. And you use that thing until it's completely run out. Maybe I do take 25 years with a bicycle, unless it's stolen, which also happens regularly. Today, people have 2, 3 bicycles, and they cost more than several of the cars that I've owned. Now, what has changed? I think what has changed is that they've recast themselves into a societal problems. And the reason why you currently, if you go from Paris to Copenhagen to Florence, you can actually very easily rent a bicycle and take these fantastic bike lanes throughout the city, is because they've recast themselves as solving 3 societal problems. They said bicycles solve the problem of traffic jams. That's one. They solve the problem of pollution, and maybe most importantly, they solve a public health problem of obesity, of people just sitting in chairs all day, driving to other chairs where they sit the rest of the day. I think that's the type of thing that we need to start thinking about. How do we do that as an industry? So how do we increase our relevance? Well, like I said yesterday, I think fun is a good starting point. This is an example I really like. Image recognition software these days is so fantastic. So that guy over there, you recognize, probably I didn't, but is Justin Timberlake. My kids thought I was completely nuts. I didn't know that. And this is just a guy, anonymous, from the 1870s that was found in the database of the photographic archives that Europeana hosts. So these are the types of things. I mean, they're frivolous on surface, yet there's a very deep sense of interesting identity issues that you can think of. So that's on that level. I think you need a simple conversation piece, as we started discussing today. But we also have deeper things to worry about. Migration has been mentioned many times. Under the European Year of Cultural Heritage with Europeana and our network, we're going to start a big campaign on migration. It will, of course, have a website, but I think the website is not the important component. We'll try to bring the topic of migration into people's living rooms. Well, not really living rooms. We'll work with libraries and museums and archives to collect stories from people who are migrants. We're not just doing that on a whim. We've really thought about it through. And I think what is important for us is to scratch beneath the surface. What are we trying to solve in the context of migration? We're not taking a political stance. I don't think that's our job as cultural institutions. We're not saying, open the gates, let everyone come in. I think this is the type of thing that we are concerned about and should be. We're all part of a migrant history. If you look at my face, you probably won't recognize me as a very typical Dutchman. I won't go into the details of that, but you want to know a minute? Yes, there are some flat Huguenots I pride myself in. some Spanish influences probably because we've been conquered by the Spanish for a while, etc. And I think all of us will be surprised to know if we do a DNA test what kind of things will surface. But the point I'm trying to make is, can we do this collectively and really take an active position in society rather than just say, you know, here's stuff and do with it whatever you want. I think we can do a lot more there. So what I want to say is we're developing a methodology with the Europeana network in order to enable us to understand that impact better. It's quite complex. Impact has been mentioned 200 times today or yesterday. I've seen it on the fantastic boards over there. And yet we fail to understand what it means to us and actually how we can understand it in our own environment. And we're trying to do something about that. So this will be released in early October. And the last thing I want to say about this is that metrics, that's what you were saying. What are the performance indicators for us if we think this is so important? So we invite people to another fantastic conference here in Estonia, a small conference, 40, 50 people, to start maybe a manifesto. Maybe something that we can all say, yes, this is, as European institutions, the types of things that we really want to get measured by. So that would be my little intervention. And I'll hand over the floor back to you.
Yep, thank you. So you said, quoted in the beginning, saying if I had to start over again. So what if you had to start all over again and start Europeana as a business rather than through the patronage model that was discussed yesterday?
Yeah.
Where would you start? Where would you start? What if?
Where would I start? I mean, I would start in communities. I think that's what we're learning. Crowdfunding, if it's about the money side of it, but also I'll work with the Wikipedians. The Wikipedians have a fantastic network to help us get the material out to the places where we need to be. They are Europeana's greatest amplifier at the moment. All the success we have will be through Wikipedia.
Okay. Yeah. Many of the points that you made about the social problems and things will be picked up by the following talks as well. So we'll have a more discussion of those later on. But any questions to Harry right now? I cannot see. So then we continue with David, who's going to talk about Georgian experiences.
Welcome to Georgia. Right? Yeah. Thank you very much. And it's not easy to speak on the second day. All clever things has been said already, right? And I think when we are looking on these words, all are beautiful words, right? Cultural heritage, social cohesion, economy, but now how to connect it, right? And I think what we all learn from our training that we need to be interdisciplinary, we need to be multidisciplinary, multifunctional, but how to do it, I don't think there is a one key. So I think every institution should develop some kind of own approach to be one hand in mainstream, but also find own identity. And the Georgian National Museum is big institution, maybe biggest one in region, at least with collections, which consists from different museums and research centers. It's one hand old institution, from other hand it's only 12 years old. But what we try to do to find a way how different activities, what we were talking a lot today and yesterday, I mean profit part and non-profit part, research science, to be integrated in one institution and to have also simultaneously asymmetric connection with different branches, but to have one common brand. I'm not so naive to think that Georgia will be able to present to the world immediately 10 brands of the museum. We're using one main brand, but beside of it, all parts have own identity, and we try to be synergized and to have, one hand, horizontal relationship, and from other hand, a vertical. That's by words, but how it should be in reality. Reality, of course, we want to be some kind of nexus between culture, science, exploration, and our main slogan is we want to connect science and art to make culture. It's beautiful words, but how? I will put 3 examples. In capital, in Tbilisi, it's much easier. We have a beautiful location. We have plagiate of the Berlin Museum Island story on Vienna Museum Cartier or Mall in Smithsonian in DC, and we call it Museum Street. We are trying to use it as one of the center of the city and country, I would say, with very ambitious name, Acropolis of Culture, and this is of course strongly connected with economy, and I don't want to speak a lot. It's a tourist attraction, and today when it's a big tourist attraction, we are getting of course more visitors. And you have a beautiful collections with a beautiful story of Golden Fleece and nice displays, etc. So it's much easier to bring people inside, and also of course we are working on this virtual place, doing all this Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, applications, etc. That's wonderful, and we are strongly for digital approach. But I'm sure nobody of us want to be museums as online supermarkets, right? We want not just sell product, we want to bring them, and what we should do. I'm coming from Soviet time, and we was always nice slogans. We are for people, right? We are doing everything for people. And like this, we are for audience, right? But I think we should be with audience. This is a main point which we try to develop and to bring different parts, you know. It's and different layers of society. And in Tbilisi, it's easier. We have nice auditorium. We can work with state opera. We can have in our courtyard top scientists, etc. This is one hand. So in capital, more or less, you can develop. But how you can do in regions, which is in nutshell, I think, main problem in all transitional countries to develop regions with local new leadership, right? But you need cases. And I will move you to Svaneti, which is almost 2,000 meters above sea level, where we have a beautiful museum with nice collections, local collections, which are exactly great story where you can see one hand local history, put it in global context, of course in Georgian story, but simultaneously working with local, very specific community. And the way is, of course, through outreach, through kids program, but also, may I say, what we try to do beside of classical programs and bringing, let's say, high-level musicians or theatres, also what we try now working with Georgian National Institution, with the National Center Innovation and Technology, to have branches inside of museum. This is, of course, very long term. It's not just you are getting immediately, but this is exactly opportunity to bring inside of museums technology development, and of course, telling the story and working with not easy society, may I say. So this is one regional approach. But beside of our own platforms, we need to use let's say, partners. And I don't think that in museum or cultural heritage field are very much more different problems what you have, for example, in medias. So what you need, like yesterday was beautiful offer to work with Wikipedia, we are working same way with National Geographic Georgia. And which beside of putting stories, of course, also about Svaneti, we are founder of National Geographic Georgia. And we are founder with the biggest Georgian internet company, which is a SilkNet. So it's a synergy working to, may I say, brands, one public, one private, but to use it not just from magazine, but also different types of activities, like lecturing, kids program. We're using, for example, this beautiful story of one journalist who are working 7 years on from Africa to South America, to use it as our platform. May I say, to getting to the market, not just simply museum exhibits using this high-end brand market, which is possible for us, and with different ways. And now we already created, in fact, joint exhibition hall with using the technology. So what I wanted to say that we try to work, and what is most important, I think, try to develop, one hand, work with very high-end, particularly research, but with grassroots. And one good example, third example, final example, is the working at the sites. So you have city capital, you have regional centers, but you have sites. And one is the site where I'm also working, I'm a scientist, where we found earliest humans in Europe, and this is a beautiful story with the National Geographic cover story, Science magazine, etc. But how we're using the site, this is another approach. Should we leave just for scientific purposes and working on this international level, education, formation? But I think one important point is to use archaeological site, not isolated. Usually you have site, you have interpretation center and research lab. We try to connect it to have one hand, and in reality you have many programs, many integration, and it's not a pontificating. It's engagement, and you are having, in this case, archaeology live. So these three examples, what I wanted to say, they are all interconnected, and what we want at the end, we want to develop new audience, or let's say, new generation with curiosity. I used this simple example, everyone knows the Einstein's quotes, that all curiosity and interest are when you are a child. Now, of course, he's ironic about himself that he was too long child. But what I wanted to say, this is what we want to get. And I think as much we will develop storytelling and curiosity, this is the audience which will be developed. And this is my last slide, and I think it exactly shows that developing this group of our visitors, it's exactly what will bring us on the very high level, and not will be just, cultural institutions or scientific institutions should be isolated and waiting someone will help them or patronize them. No, we will be strong partners, and these guys will be strong leaders, I'm sure. Thank you.
I think it's a wonderful example of where the expert fits in. There was a discussion yesterday that how we engage with communities. Well, we still need to keep the expert role in there. Any questions to David right now? Can't see. Continuing the what if, you went back to the Soviet times. Lots of these very good work that you're doing with the communities. What if the world was different? And let's say government made it mandatory for dutiful citizens to go and visit a memory institution once a week.
You see,
would we work in a different, under kind of different paradigm here? What would be different?
I don't know. You see, I'm not a person who wants to complain for problems. I want to solve. And our team is like this. I think problem is in us, how we are able to bring people back. Big difference between Soviet, let's say, cultural institutions and modern was everything was static, you remember. You are always waiting guides, somebody will show, etc. Today you have these opportunities to have temporary exhibition halls. Even in high mountains you can have modern art exhibitions. So let's find a way. I think we have fantastic opportunities with this multifunctional platform today to be with very different activities. So I don't think we need anybody. We need ourselves more.
So it's in us.
Of course, problems are in us always.
Okay, excellent. Anyone wants to respond to that? No. You're still a bit sleepy here. So can I have a show of hand? Who's been to a museum in the last month?
We're in museum.
Quite a few. Who would like to go and visit the museum in Georgia? Yeah, many more. Who's been to Europeana site in the last month? Wow, quite a lot of them. Who's been to a library in the last 3 months, let's say? Wow, that is impressive. Minna, this is a good start for you then to go.
3 months? I mean, thank you, Raivo. Yes, I mean, this is a good start, and has been so, entertaining, so it's hard to stand up and talk to you, but at the same time, I'm feel so privileged and happy to be here. So thank you for inviting us. I'm going to tell you a little bit about difficult words that are hard to pronounce. So I'm going to talk about social trust, social innovations, and libraries. Professor Ross put it so nicely and completely in a way that there's a tiny little room for me to talk about definitions. But while I'm here talking, I would like to, in a way, remind myself and maybe all of you that social innovation is actually about aiming at improving human well-being. So its means and the end in the same thing, in the same process. It can be, it come in all sizes and in all shapes, but that's the essence of social innovation. What is social capital? That's another buzzword that has been mentioned quite many times during this conference. One way to define it would be that social capital consists of different kind of networks. They are physical and digital. They have to do with our work and our leisure time. They have to do with our families and friends. But it's the very, very, very big component of social capital is social trust. And what is social trust? Trust and the lack of trust has been mentioned this morning, and that's something that I would like us to pay a little bit more attention to. Social trust is willingness to discuss and to meet and to have a dialogue with each other. Social trust is the fact that you trust other people, the ones that you know and those that you haven't met before. And the social trust is willingness to trust in institutions. Member institutions are typically proud of themselves because they are so trusted. But trust is sticky, but not that sticky. So let's be careful with it. We have to earn that trust. Why we need social trust? We need it for well-functioning society. We need it for market economy, and it doesn't mean that the deepest value of cultural organizations and their work lies in the economic side, but we need this trust. And we need it for civil society, or as Danish professor Christian Albert Larsen puts it, attempts to create democracy, market economy, and civil society without the presence of mutual trust among citizens are likely to fail. A cohesive society is a buzzword, and that has been in every second report of the European Union and OECD for the last decade or so. And it's nice that it actually has in its kind of, definition, both the idea of well-being, the same kind of aim as we have in social innovations, and one of its components or ingredients is again trust. But let's, talk in practical terms. What are the ingredients for social capital and social cohesion? Maybe opportunities to everyone to access education and culture, availability and also accessibility of information, versatile literacy skills, opportunities for lifelong learning, and competence development or capacity building, active citizenship, democracy, and freedom of expression. And funny as it is, these are exactly the aims of the Finnish Public Library Act that was put into force January this year. Because duties of public libraries are, they provide access to information and to culture content. They do provide information services, guidance and support in the acquisition and use of information. They provide premises for learning, for working, for civic activities, and they promote social and cultural dialogue. I have a few very simple, down-to-earth examples about the ways that the public libraries actually promote social innovation and strengthen the trust between people and the trust to the institution, and the ways that they actually create social innovations themselves with their partners and with their users. The first very simple thing, but I think this is an important thing, is the premises. The premises of a typical Finnish library looks like this. So you can see there's a place to work and to study. There's a cafeteria that's really needed. There are collections, there is ICT equipment, there are people to help you. Then there are newer things like makerspaces, which are fantastic for capacity building among citizens. Usually the things that you can do there are related to new technology, but not always. I mean, you can play with Legos, but it's about sharing and learning and experiencing. The very, very simple social innovation is an library bus. I don't know if it's an innovation any longer, but because I don't know if something becomes very mainstream, is it any longer an innovation, or is it just, an ordinary activity? Or let's talk about the openness and user-generated content. This is a wall or a screen for users' social media content inside the library. But actually, this is a screenshot from the Facebook side of the library, because the library asks for the community and people to comment that is this a good thing to do in the library kind of way, and they ask people to add content to that screen, and that screen is physically in the library, but that screen is also digitally on the net. And this is my favorite. It's kind of a cheeky thing, and then again it isn't, because if I'm thinking about the deepest needs of human beings, one of them might be the need to express our wishes and tell our secrets to somebody who can actually trust. And that's why we have wishing wells in many cities in Europe. But this is a wishing well in the library, where you can write your wish in a little piece of paper and put that paper in the wishing well. And the library guarantees 98% success rate, so that is a lot. And in a way, I feel this is a physical and mental token of trust and hope, and those are the two things that we need. Thank you.
Thank you. So, good examples of library as a space for people to do things. We talked about teaching the audiences, engaging the audiences here, and about intuitivity of our services. We bring people to the library, but we still have to teach them how to use a library. Those literacy skills were also on your slide. So what if people knew how to use the library, or if we didn't have to teach them how to use a library?
Do you actually think that's about using the library, or is it about understanding information. I mean,
library is a knowledge organizing system.
yes, exactly. We are happy to be taught by the users, right? But if you actually read studies about user behavior on the net, you pretty soon learn that they are technically capable, very good, you know. But when it comes to deep understanding of the content, you might need some help. I might need some help. And that's about human interaction, really. It's not about, this is the thing, you asked my dear colleague from Georgia about this kind of, if the museums wouldn't be like voluntary, you just have to go there. It's same with the library. The biggest, nicest thing in libraries is that it's about your willingness to go there. Okay, you want to go there, it's informal, you can stay in your privacy, that's okay. You don't want to talk to anybody, you don't want to learn anything, that is okay. But if you want to, so there are people. That's a very
Nordic.
That's so. But yes, in a way. So I wouldn't like to go to the library. That would be like a place where a desperate, librarian would kind of, grab my hands and, I'm here to help you. I hate that kind of shopping. So why would I go to a library? But that's not the way. It's part of the skills of the staff to know. How to, what kind of a dialogue you should have. And I think that quite often we both are learning, even when you're reading to a reading dog, which is another innovation in Scandinavian libraries.
Yeah, good. Yvette, please. We need a microphone.
Yes.
Let's see if there is a microphone still here. Oh, one is coming.
Thank you. A really simple question, though. Who goes to libraries, and has it changed over the last 5 years?
80% in Finland. I don't have the European statistics, so I'm only talking about my own country. 80% of Finnish people go to library regularly.
But I'm more interested in a granular analysis.
Yes.
Who goes?
And in a way, everybody goes. What is interesting is actually the correlation between the collections and the people, because I would say that about 30% of the collections are for children and young people, but they are read more than any other part of the collection. So those people that go to libraries in Finland, more often than others, are children and young people. But it's the whole nation in a way. So actually, those that don't go to libraries, quite a huge percentage of those are actually readers, but they go to the bookshop. They have another way of using this kind of.
So it almost sounds like going to libraries is compulsory in Finland.
Well, I was going to add, so, audience development isn't a big issue there, clearly, because it's what you do. If you could stand outside of Finland and perhaps in other countries, I can tell you that the numbers of attenders are both going down and changing radically. My central library I go to is fabulous now because the numbers have changed, but the demography is utterly different. And I would have thought, just by looking, that 60 to 70% of the users are migrants, using it for information, for technology, for learning. And it used to be, in my day, much more a middle-class event.
Yes.
So I see massive changes, but clearly that's not the case in Finland.
Yes, and we, Finland is an odd country in many ways. This is one of the oddities. But then again, the one thing that is new is that people actually don't. There is a little downfall with the use of collections. The collections are used less and less every year, only a little bit, but you can see the trend. But the premises of the library are used more and more. So that is happening. So it becomes more and more like a social place, like a hub for the community, and that's what the community wants it to be. And that's why our new library legislation that I was really, really happy to be able to write with my colleagues is much and much more about the social role of libraries than the previous one.
And that, of course, is reflected also in the library building design. So new libraries that open in Europe often, always, I think, cater for those empty spaces where people can come and do. Of course, Dock 1 in Aarhus in Denmark is the flagship at the moment of that kind of library design. Any more questions right now? No, then we move on to Janos, who's going to talk about the creative city in Tallinn. And I have a story that connects the trust question that Minna focused on with Telliskivi region. Colleagues from the National Library a few weeks ago went and set up a little pop-up library in that region. Just to advertise our services and tell people that there is such a thing as a library, and there are books and you can learn something from the books. So they stand there in the middle of a square with their little desk and all the stand, and people were a bit wary of going to them, because you don't really know what they're selling there, these funny people. So finally they went around, gave some leaflets, invited people to come and talk to them. And then they had their transactions, talked about books, but people wanted to pay in the end. And then again they said, what do you mean this is free service? Well, this is very unusual. There must be a catch somewhere. How come people don't come to this area and give away something for free? I'd rather be paying you money than take this book for free. So there is a social trust question of, if you go out of your traditional role and say, have it, this is free, this is public good, people may also have this little mistrust of your services. So this all happened in the area that we're going to hear about now.
I made that slide a long time ago when it was still kind of, the situation was funny, so I need to change that. Not so funny anymore. But anyway, I'm the usual, talking about heritage, then I'm the usual evil in the room. I can call myself a real estate developer in a classical term. So the biggest fights we always have usually are with the heritage department, but I've taken a different approach like 10 years ago, and I'm going to talk you quickly through what we did in Telliskivi and how it all happened, and that it goes far beyond just pretty buildings and how we did that. We've come up with a model to kind of intertwine it with each other, the real estate development part and the social kind of software that we have around there, and so we're talking about an area located in Tallinn, between two residential districts and the city center of Old Town. I can zoom in a bit. You can see here the 10 different buildings that make up the Telliskivi Creative City. I understand it's not quite Zaha Hadid stuff, but bear with me, I can show you where we started out from. So we had the early 20th century limestone legacy with some very blunt upgrades from the Soviet era. And so we started out with this, that today is this. Nice place for young creatives and other locals to hang out. Also our main square, and what it looks like today. So it's the conversion therapy of architectural kind. This is our first theater built in Estonia over 100 years. And how it looks from inside, before and after. And so something from a more befitting a Murakami novel to a cozy design shopping street. And this picture actually is taken 3 a.m. in the morning, not in the evening. And our people that basically make up Telliskivi Creative City, that as you quickly saw the conversion, then it's obviously the hardware matters, but it's the kind of software that makes it tick, and the social and creative software. And this is something that we're actually dealing with on a daily basis, and where most of our energy goes, and our aim has been since beginning. And yeah, we've been about 9-8 years around, and we can give it some parameters. Altogether, it's 40,000 square meters of buildings in 10 different buildings. Today, we have around 250 companies working on it, creative companies working on the territory on a daily basis, and around 1,500 creative industry professionals, which, at our knowledge, makes us the largest creative hub in the world, actually. We have around actually more than 600 cultural events every year on the territory, and these are visited by more than 700,000 people. Let's go quickly through the main pillars. First and the most important part is a community incubator. We are there for the creative industry. The whole kind of setup is built in a way to cater to the creative industries. Out of these 250 companies, around 90% are, or 250 companies, 90% are purely creative industry companies. These are architects, designers, graphic designers, musicians, recording studios, theaters, also a small share of non-profit organizations who are not directly in the creative industry, but they very much share the same values that creative industries. And then we have the other 5%. We have commercial companies, we have 7 restaurants, and we have a printing house, and we have a small kindergarten, and everything that is needed in order for it to operate as a city. And over the past couple of years, we added a tiny percent of also different startups that give the creative sector also some kind of more touch to the reality sometimes. We look at this community as a kind of art exhibition, which means that every resident or tenant that we have in Creative City is actually carefully chosen. We only can give rooms out of to 2 or 3 out of 10 who actually want to have room in Telescope Creative City. That every tenant needs to add some kind of value to the Creative City, and it always has to be some kind of social value to the community. And then the rental payment is never a value. It could be 10 times more. It doesn't guarantee them any space. The rental payments like a clean underwear. We don't need to talk about it every morning. It has to be there in order for it to operate, but it has to be some kind of a value to the community. And we give artificially low the rental levels for the creative industry, and these we subsidize by the commercial activities through our restaurants and other things. So the creative community kind of hurts a small group of businesses there in order to live off of them. So we turn the usual business model around. There's a quick quote from one of our residents. The second big part is culture. Like I said, we have more than 600 cultural events every year. And last year, these were visited by more than 700,000 people. These cultural events, which makes us also by far, I think, the largest kind of cultural center in Estonia, or at least in the Baltics. This works very much the same way as the business model with the residents, that we give the rooms for free for 4 to 5 events out of 10. We pay for their electricity, heating, cleaning, help them with advertising and everything else that we can. These are what we call the fragile but worthy events, the type of cultural events who would never make enough money from ticket sales to actually rent the venue anywhere, but who are culturally valuable enough that they actually should have a nice place to perform whatever they perform. And also this subsidization comes then from the other 5 events who are still culturally events, but more kind of economically stronger already, that they can actually pay some rent, and so we use them for that. We also have 5 original festivals that originally started as marketing events, but actually have turned out to be profitable events. We have a Telliskivi Street Food Festival, we have a Flea Market Festival, we have Telliskivi Birthday, which is like a small music festival, we have Telliskivi Dance Festival, and Telliskivi Hidden Side. And since last year's Telliskivi Street Food Festival, we made our festivals also carbon neutral, just to clean up after ourselves. That's a quick, again, a quote. And then, now you must be thinking this is nice, but you won't make any money with that. So guess what? We actually can. Profitability is built into this model since the beginning, because we are 100% privately owned and privately funded. We don't get any support or ever gotten from city, state, EU, or any other outside funder. So we are completely self-sufficient and economic, actually quite profitable in the end of the day. In Telliskivi, the business and culture are intertwined like the 2 strings of a double helix. One cannot exist without the other. We couldn't have the creative sector there without the support of the smaller part to the commercial side, or vice versa. We've actually figured out that a few years ago that we stumbled upon the actually working business model, and so we also exported that to Tartu, where some of you yesterday evening. It's about 1/4 of the size of Telliskivi in Tallinn. But so we started, so it works quite well, and then now we're about to take it to other countries as well. We got 2 awards over the last couple of years, which are none of them on its own are not that interesting, but together they make up a nice package. That we got the award as a property guru, I think 2016, 15, which is awarded to the kind of most outstanding real estate investment in the country in a certain year. And so we were not the usual suspects. I don't know where they got my number from. And then the other award that we got was given us to the head of the parliament for the company who most contributed to civil society 1 year. So the fact that these two awards ended up in the same company usually doesn't happen. That it's either you're very business oriented or you're an NGO and somebody needs to constantly support you in one way. So it's the fact that we got them both illustrates our business model and the value that we see in that. That's also a quote from a non-profit organization network. We have around 20-30 non-profits in our territory as well. And to the total role in society, that we started out as any other company with a corporate social responsibility and tried to have some kind of a role in society. But for us, it has always been something much more. And I really like the term. I think John Grant from St. Luke's coined it in the 80s in London, the total role in society. And for us, this is not just a simple line in annual report, but this is our moral compass that we base our decisions on a daily basis, that what we do, what we don't do, what festival we take in, what tenant we take in, what value they add to the society. And it's a constant kind of mind exercise about that. And we're very open about what we support and what not. And there's no distinction between our social values and our corporate values, that we are not afraid of saying out what we support or what we believe in. And this is very, very integral part of what we do. But I don't know what's the next slide. Oh, it's also one channel of us. And but to talk about what the heritage part that we took from there, because what we started out is also a piece of heritage, but it's not the usual piece of heritage that mostly are talked about. So it's not something under protection, but it's still heritage. So the Soviet old abandoned factory buildings. And so if we talk about what the impact has been and also the economic impact, then what we found out is that kind of trying to make something old work again, actually from a business point of view, makes a lot more sense and is a lot more profitable than rebuilding something. Because if you rebuild something new, because if you take the old heritage part, then it kind of leaves the society with a continuity. They kind of they observe it in a much easier way, or the kind of the dignity and the identity has been kind of preserved, and it's not something new they have to become used to. And to talk about the kind of the impact, then we can only measure it. We can also probably put the price tag on that, but also we looked at these kind of softer values, and there was an impact made about what has been the impact of Telliskivi Creative City for the northern part of Tallinn a couple of years ago, and just as a summary from this research and or a study, and it was not made by us. We found out about it a year after it was done, and it was quite surprising, because what we did our kind of thing, and we didn't think about the wider implications of what it has to one part of Tallinn, but it was quite an eye-opening. So this even more played to the total role of society, and then kind of helps us guide our activities even further. But probably somebody can also put the price tag on that what the value of this percentage actually is, because when we started out there, it was not a nice place to go. We had guards with dogs walking around the territory in the beginning just to keep everybody safe, because it's nice, not the nice part of Tallinn, but now it's probably the most sought after region in Tallinn. So to have an apartment or whatever. And also the best award we got 2 weeks ago was that Uber is now been in Estonia for over 2 years, and they did statistics, and Telliskivi Creative City is a #1 destination in all over Estonia where people drive with Uber. So this is it's kind of funny, but actually quite a valuable piece of insight, because this is actually like the kind of the audience award from any movie or something. So it's actually the most valuable part, I think. So thank you.
It's a very good example of, if you get the business model right, the communities will come, and lots of very good impact measurements there that we should take note of. Do you know how many people are taking a taxi to your museum? Would you like to find out? Talk to Uber, I guess. So you're already hosting a theater there and lots of concerts. Will there be room for a museum there?
The right type of museum. It needs to add value to the community, as I said. So probably nothing that just preserves historical items, but if it's kind of exhibited in one or the other way to the communities around it, then why not?
So preferably a digital museum.
No, it could be a physical one. We have several galleries. They're all for free for the artists to present their art. It's just have to book in their slot, but so it's...
Okay. Any questions to Janos? Again, I'm standing in a spot where I can't see anyone. No questions. Oh, no. Down here, please.
It looks absolutely fantastic, and the scale of it is stunning. This sounds negative, and I really don't want it to be, because I'm a great supporter of what you're doing. But whenever I talk about culture and community-led regeneration, there's always some miserable person somewhere that says, yes, but then, house prices go up, it gets gentrified, and developers come in, and then artists move out. I don't get a sense of that in your place. Can you please give me a good answer to those miserable people that say that to me?
I mean, this is what usually happens. In my longer version, I have a special slide of a picture from East London. There's a big graffiti on a wall which says "shit house to penthouse," and this is that usually happens. In the creative city, we approach it a different way. The creative city it's not the kind of a step to something else, that this is the kind of main goal, and it will be a creative city in 15 years as well, and we also keep the rents artificially low, and so the whole economic is built on that. Obviously, what has happened around us over the last 10 years is you wouldn't recognize the area anymore. And I moved away from Telliskivi in 2007, 6 months before I started it, and now trying to move back over the past 2 years. It's just nothing to buy. So in that sense, it is what happens, but the cities are struggling with that, and we see the interest from other city governments around the world who are interested in Telliskivi and kind of bring that concept to their cities in order to revitalize areas that have been run down over their time. So cities are in constant development. So I think it's if it's done right, it's a natural process, but not always done right. So it has to be organic. You can't force it.
Okay. A little bit of discussion. We have time left for that. One of the things that strikes me, already Seamus's presentation started with that. It seems that successful business models are built on aggregation of collections and services. So is it possible for a single institution to achieve all of that? Europeana is an aggregator of lots of things. You have aggregated lots of interesting companies that share the same community around it. Ancestry.com, again, aggregates content, services, and those things. Do we think that this aggregation is something that Cultural Heritage 3.0 is us towards collaboration with each other to achieve new aims? Is that what
It's only way.
It's the only way?
Yeah.
I think?
Synergy is only way, and finding strategic partners. I can't see big difference between museum and libraries activities, and I think if you can work on consortium levels, you can quite, at the moment, or big companies. I think this is, today it's must.
So how do we incentivize institutions to work with each other, especially across domains? So how can we get a museum and a library and a property developer to work together?
It depends on task, and I think it's very easy to find this way of combination. For example, it's very clear the libraries are more and more public, and the museums have enough spaces to give for it. And that's a very simple way on one hand. And also I think what in cultural heritage, what lacks maybe today, it's more synergy with university and PhD programs. We need to develop more, and we will be much more access, even just pragmatically, to EU funds for European Research Council or European Horizon 2020. I think if we will look only towards cultural things, it's very limited. But if we can be much broader, it's easier. particularly a country like Georgia, who is now associated with you, this is a new opportunities of this kind of synergy work.
I was just thinking aggregation. I mean, you're talking, the example here is very much in the physical world, but it will have a digital component. But what I was really fascinated by yesterday was the idea of, it's about metadata again, right? What are we aggregating? I mean, it's not just the content. It's not only the metadata about the content, it's the user behaviors around the content. If we can learn anything from Google, I'd like to bring up the word. Google and actually Alphabet, their mother company. I mean, they give all this stuff for free because they make business out of exactly that. They aggregate data. Now the question then becomes, and why do they do that? Because there's value in that. I think that's they're solving potential problems with it. I mean, of course, they make money out of it. There are huge privacy issues with it. But I think that's actually where we can play a role. If trust is what we're selling, then maybe aggregating metadata and user behavior in a trusted environment is something that we need to pull forces on, right?
But here is an aspect, and this goes a bit into detail that I'd like to pick on. Yvette mentioned yesterday that filter bubble problem that Google and other search engines are placing people into. And Minna was saying that trust is sticky, but not that sticky. Is there something that we could do differently with our search engines and models than Google does? Can we make our search algorithms public to generate more trust towards our services as opposed to Google, who will display only those things that they think we need to see or that are linked to their advertising campaigns? Could that be part of the success model for creating more trust? And this is really a question for you, I think.
Well, I don't know. I mean, one thing we're doing is fining them heavily if they're not trustworthy, right? We just gave Google, as a European Union, billions of dollars in fines because they put their own search results on top of others. So yes.
Did any of that come to Europeana, by the way? Any of that fine, will that end up with Europeana?
No, I don't think so. I hope not. No, because actually I think on the search engine level, we'll never win from Google. You're not even competing. It's ridiculous to even consider it. But I think forming good partnerships with Google and the Google likes is a more interesting avenue to investigate. Not just on the finding level, but can there be, can we influence how they provide search results? But I would be wary to start developing search engines from scratch. We're not terribly good at that. We don't have that capacity.
But can we be transparent about what kind of search models we are employing and it's not something that everybody will understand, but those people who are interested in, is it the whole truth that we're displaying or only selective, then they should be able to verify that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was starting to think, especially since Minna put trust so much on the forefront, what would be the performance indicator for us if we would say trust is the main thing that we're selling? So these types of things would probably fit into an indicator, right?
But it seems to me this is exactly where we need to be going with this whole audience development and engagement with communities direction that we still don't know exactly what the performance indicators are going to be for that, how to measure our impacts towards communities where we've come through that stage of converting our services into, well, I wouldn't say public funding, but monetary return. But that next question is very difficult. But Janos' slide already had many good indicators here that I think we need to bring on board. And perhaps one of the things that resonates from yesterday morning's keynote for me is that we talk a lot about knowledge economy, but the word meaning has popped up quite a lot in our discussion. So I think we need to think of ourselves as moving more in the direction of economy of meaning. And that goes back to your metadata aggregation and questions like that. So let's not just be knowledge providers, but let's be providers of meaningful objects and context around them. to help the communities to form. And of course, to enable that, we need to think of ourselves more as platforms, I guess is the word to use here. Minna had showed us how libraries are providing space for people to come and do their own thing, and Telliskivi is a place where communities come and organize their events and bring more people in. So that's a key question. I would suggest that think of cultural heritage as a platform, and that's the collaboration and aggregation can also perhaps happen around that one. Is that a useful way to move forward?
Definitely. I think we've for a couple of years already put Europeana as a platform rather than a portal. I think that's a fairly old, it's now an established view of the world where we don't see ourselves as portals anymore, but as platforms. But as shown on the access level, that has some implications. You can't be a platform for reuse if the material you're showing is only valuable for access. It doesn't have reusable licenses. It is not fit on a technical level to be reused. I mean, then it's just empty words. So if we want to be platforms, and I firmly believe that, because that's our role in society, platforms of trustworthy materials, then we need to put our money where our mouth is.
Okay.
The taxpayers' money, really, where our mouths are.
Well, not only. David, do you have any final words on platforms? You showed us a few.
I think we are a wonderful platform, and most important thing to connect humans. Museums are not for chirurgy or operations; they are antidotes, and cultural institutions are, I think, best antidote for fundamentalism and fightings. And I think if we will develop and will use, and another important performance measurement could go through diplomacy. I don't think cultural heritage is strongest tool of diplomacy which can be used. And what we need today, all these things we are working after always,
Could you explain cultural diplomacy a little bit? Because I find it fascinating.
No, I think it's a very wide term I'm using also. I like more science diplomacy, but anyway, use this platform to connect future generations, and cultural heritage studies is one of very strong instrument, particularly field schools and all these kind of things where you can connect people, and we are doing, I'm sure others are doing, and it's in my field and generally in archaeology, which is one of the key research in cultural heritage, is the changing of paradigm. It was very colonial science, big countries were going in small countries and develop. Now it's no more. You need to develop local institutions which could be later strong partner. And this is exactly opportunity to build trust, but also really strong research interactions, which later goes in different directions. So.
Okay, Minna?
I was thinking about another thing again, this kind of measuring of impact. And the beautiful combination of these, our ecosystems, and the way that we actually are so interdependent and intertwined, and how problematic it is, how difficult it is to measure impact of ecosystems, because actually usually those who fund would like to know what that institution, that one is actually doing. And it's hard to say when the impact is the result of a process that involves so many of us, which is a fantastic thing. And that's why we so often, at least in my country, tend to have outcome indicators for institutions, because that's much easier.
Output.
So at the same time that what we actually really need to do is becoming more and more difficult, and we need to do it anyway, because the way that we do things it's very different compared to the way we did things a decade ago, but we are still actually measuring the things the way we used to do them before. So this is gap, and this is a need, and that is true, but then I'm thinking about the reality and state budget, and I'm thinking about myself explaining to the big bosses at the ministry this kind of a beautiful indicator of a very complex thing. Yeah. So and I'm happy that we are going to go forward with that. I'm happy, Harry, that you told about, one part of it, which is European impact assessment kind of work. But I see this beautiful landscape it needs some, gardening.
A very quick response.
Yeah.
Or
Okay, very quick response. I think we need to learn from what Mr. Van Nispen said yesterday. If we start looking at it as a very daunting task, then I think we've lost the battle before we even started. There's one thing I want to mention, the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. Has anyone heard of that? Can you just raise your hand? Right,
quite a lot, yeah.
Yeah, but a third, I would say, right? I think that is now becoming a very interesting instrument to start talking about these things. So you don't have to convince your government that you need to do these things because they want to convince you. That's the idea. How do you contribute to the things that our nation should be contributing to?
Okay, Janos, any final thoughts on platforms as a way forward?
I mean, it's the same lessons we've taken from Telliski, I think, from the different mine institutions. The kind of the integration that was mentioned earlier is quite a kind of key moment for me, at least, because today it seems a bit like the different institutions are doing their own thing in their own kind of bubble, but to kind of integrate it more so that the user, in the end of the day, actually gets a kind of more integrated or a wholesome experience out of it, the memory institutions in general, than or the kind of makes ease of access better. Like with iTunes, it was said that people don't want to steal music; they just want to get it in a very efficient way. So the same thing that I think applies here a lot.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like you to give a big round of applause to wake up the two people in the audience who are sleeping. And for the good panel, of course, as well. So Ragnar will have some
excellent work.
Last
Thank
minute,
you very much. Yes, quick stretching, breathing fresh air, drinking good coffee break. And then we expect you back for the very final part of the conference. Please, those that have not yet put your names down for the trips that will follow after lunch, please do that in the at the information desk. And then see you in 10 to 15 minutes. Okay?
I'll leave you with the thought of what if there was no copyright? And come back with questions.
Do you still want me to do sit and do reflections?
We've been talking about everything digital. But as you all know from your everyday work, as professionals working in museums and libraries and archives and other heritage sites, that the reality when you really go into all digital is more complicated than that. There's lots of questions regarding the copyrights and this ever-remaining finding the ever-remaining balance between the rights of the author versus public access to the content. So how do we overcome that? How can we make both sides happy? Is that mission impossible or not? That's why I have these three people here with me. We are going to cut our discussion a bit shorter than planned, so you still have your lunch. Don't worry. There's going to be the trips and more information coming when we are closing to the end of the program. But I'm very happy to just quickly introduce the three panelists. We have Professor Silke von Lewinsky from Max Planck Institute, and she's going to make the last remarks. And she's academician, so she looks at this more from the theoretical and scientific point of view. But I think this is very important because we really don't want only to dig into the usual discussion of the challenges and problems that everybody's facing, but see if there are possible ways out of this mess as well. So Silke is here for that. Then we have Vincent Bonnet, and Vincent comes from the European Bureau of Libraries Library Information Documentation Associations. Yes. Was that good? Yes. I studied it, all.
That's a really complicated name, yes.
And you start with our panel with a short introductory kind of a talk. And then we also have Enrico Turin, and he's a deputy director of the Federation of European Publishers. He comes from close to Venice, but every time you ask where you come from, he says Brussels. So, well, he's close to the corridors of power. Okay. Anyway, we are ready to start. We really, really hope that you are very active now. Don't sleep. Don't be Estonian. Don't be Finnish either. You know the story about the extroverted and introverted Finns? You know?
Yes.
You all know about this?
Yes.
How do you differentiate between the extroverted Finnish and introverted Finnish person? You know, when you talk to them, when they meet, you know, at the dinner party, then the introverted Finn only during this speaking to you only looks at his shoes. And the extroverted Finn looks at the other person's shoes. So I hope that you're all more extroverted now, and we are going to take questions and comments from you, from the audience throughout the session, so we are not keeping them at the end, okay? So there will be microphones on both sides. Vincent.
Thank you very much for the invitation for me to speak today. So I will talk you briefly because we have been channeled by Ragnar that we have 7 minutes each for making a presentation. I will talk very briefly about copyright for libraries and cultural heritage institutions. I will mainly do a pitch for libraries actually and what are the issues that we are facing. We also will not talk really about problems, but what are potential solutions. So EBLIDA is the European Bureau of Library Information Documentation Associations. I reckon it's a really complicated name. But we are representing libraries of all over Europe from 36 countries, and we promote the interests of the libraries and are doing lobbying on behalf of them. But I would first like to start with a little bit of a flashback. And if we look back at the start of the century, 20th century, already this question of innovation was pretty much into the mind of the people. And John and Fred Withers were the civil engineers in the US, and he made 100 predictions of how the year 2000 would look like. And among his predictions, there were the coming of the television, digital color picture, and mobile phones. And you can see here that already mobile phones were in the mindset of the people. Also, big companies advertising the way that they were looking positively towards the future, like big tobacco company or chocolate company, made commissioned postcards to creators and artists and put them in the package when they were selling them. So we see that already at that time, this question of innovation were pretty much in the mind of everybody. At the same time, in 1895, Paul Otlet and Henri Lafontaine, who were both Belgian lawyers, creating the Universal Decimal Classification. And it was a way for them to organize the world knowledge into a big system that would be easy then to find the information you need for. And after First World War, they created the Mondanium. That was actually, you see the drawers that were there, where they stored all the content that they have created and all the cardboards that we're using to find back where would be the source of this information. And Google actually recognized that the Mondanium was a Google of paper created in the 20th century. So we see that already there are strong links between knowledge and how we can give access to knowledge and how much it's at the core of the people. I would like to make a small pitch on libraries and mention that libraries are everywhere. That's the only public space that is for free and that you find in every spaces in Europe and all over the world. You find them in big cities, rural areas, anywhere. But you also find libraries in hospitals and in prisons. So where people have difficulties in actually being connected to the world, they have this possibility through libraries. And when we look at the number of libraries in Europe, we have 70,000 libraries over the continent, employing 400,000 people, and we are reaching out to 100 million people a year. So this means that we have 1/5 of the population that comes into library at least once in a year. I don't know what other public institution can actually provide this kind of figures. That's really enormous. But that's not the only thing. I mean, libraries are also pretty much visible in all kinds of different constituencies. And I don't know how many of you came with a Lufthansa flight. Nobody? Only one? Oh. So my example is not really good, but I traveled with Lufthansa, and actually you can see there in the picture is very bad. It took from my mobile phone, but I have an old version. So this is a picture of the public library of Saint-Geneviève, the library, Saint-Geneviève Library, sorry, from France, National Library. There was an article in the Lufthansa magazine 2 months ago. Here it's an article about libraries in Cambodia, where they are providing libraries in workers' factory to get people access to give people access to knowledge. That was an article in the Air France magazine. And this is a picture of the National Library of Pristina in Kosovo that was in the flight that brings me here. So you see that libraries are everywhere and they are referenced in many, many, many documents. In the 50s, so I continue with a little bit of historical background. In the 50s, in shanty towns all over Europe, but especially in France, actually, charity organizations fund street librarians to go and reach those people in these shanty towns to bring them access to knowledge and information. So they were providing with those people who doesn't have access to information, books, magazines, etc. The same thing as we're doing now with migrants. So this is also really deeply rooted into the minds of librarians. And at the same time, in 1957, were the signatures of the Treaties of Rome, actually, so creating the Euratom Energy Agreement and the European Economic Community, that where the grounds of the European Union are. Now, 60 years later, almost 60 years later, we have this Lisbon Treaty from 2009 that was consolidated in 2012 and provides some legal entity to the European Union, also provides some new provisions like the possibility for member states to leave, as we have with the Brexit. And what do you think is the place of libraries in this treaty? Do you think that libraries are considered as an exclusive competence of the European Union? Do you think that there are shared competence between the European Union and member states? Or are they only a competence of the member states? Who thinks that is the first is the right answer, second the right answer, or three the right answer? Three, okay, you're right. So 3 is the right answer. Libraries are only a member state competence. And when I say only, is that because, sorry, I skipped something. When I say only, at the same time, the European Union has a shared competence on copyright. So there is a legislation by default that is done for libraries. If we look back into the past, we have a directive on rental and lending from 1992, a copyright directive from 2001, and an orphan works directive from 2012. And all those directives have a direct implication on libraries at European Union level. But at the same time, libraries are a competency of the member states. So there is a bit of, discrepancy here. So that's the reason why copyright matters so much for libraries and cultural heritage institutions. That's the reason why each of us here have to tackle this problem. And when we look at the future, sorry, I skipped some of my slides to stay on time. When we look at the future and what is happening already now, we have the question of big data and how we are dealing with this question. We are not sure yet. And when we look at artificial intelligence and the way that progress has been made over the past 20 years, be mindful that 20 years ago, IBM Deep Blue, won against Garry Kasparov, a chess game. So that was the first time artificial intelligence won against a human being. But last year, actually, Google DeepMind won against Lee Sedol, a Go game champion. And Go is much more complicated game than chess. So the progress made over 20 years are enormous. And we start to have the first magazines, first novels that are written through artificial intelligence, first TV series. They are not yet public, but it's ongoing. And who will have the copyright for this creation? Will it be the computer programming, or will it be the human being that created this program? Who will own the copyright of that? We don't know. So we are facing issues at the European level with the current ongoing copyright reform, and those issues have been throughout the whole discussion regarding this directive. And from a library perspective, library and cultural heritage perspective, we focus on 4 articles in this directive. The one on text and data mining that is crucial for research and education. The one on illustration for teaching to ensure that actually people get access through education material, also through libraries. The question of preservation and the question of out-of-commerce work. So those 4 issues are actually the main issues that we are focusing on. And I would like to quote Judy Ratash, I hope I said it correctly, not completely. What can you say to me for me?
Jüri Ratas.
The Prime Minister of Estonia, who declared in February this year that striving towards a seamless physical and digital connectivity is in the interest of the whole European Union, as economic success cannot be separated from the free movement of goods, service, people, capital, and knowledge. And I think that's the first time a policymaker mentioned the free circulation of knowledge as something really important for the European Union. So, as we are all librarians and museum people and ministry from the Ministry for Culture people, we should work towards that. So we count on you for that. Thank you.
Merci. For a moment, we thought we have a translation in French as well, and to give a reason for people to hear different languages. Europe is about diversity of languages and cultures. We thought that we will do half of the session in French. But then we thought we are not going to punish you. Enrico, your thoughts on this?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
When you start talking, then they do.
If I start talking, well, of course, if I don't talk, you won't hear me. That's quite a fact.
Yeah, it's been a long conference. Don't worry.
Yeah. All right. Hi, everyone. And thanks for having me here. It's really a pleasure. It's been really nice. Even though I hear that it's going to rain in the afternoon, still I'll keep the memory of the sun I saw this morning at 4, I think, when I opened my eyes. And well, to start, so we're here to talk about commercial interest versus common good. But I'd like really to, in a way, question the question, as in, does there need to be a versus in there? Because our point of view is no, there doesn't need to be a versus in there. Not as far as we accept that we live in a market economy, that there are businesses that have, well, sustainability to bear in mind, and not as long as we accept that even culture and business can live together, which is basically the foundation of the creative industries. That's why they're called creative industries, because there's both the cultural and creative and the business side. So, as long as we have an interest in creation, in the production of cultural and creative goods, and in cultural diversity, I do not see a dichotomy between these two. Of course, there are different ways of interacting. There are different ways in which the two sides can be balanced, but they do work together. To take the question, what if copyright didn't exist? Well, for me, we should definitely invent it, not only because it gives me a living, but because it gives a living to a lot of worthier people than me that are authors, publishers, musicians, creators, all of them. And, believe it or not, also to libraries and librarians. And actually, it would be nice if once, instead of having Vincent and me here, you had a real librarian and a real publisher. Because
I'm a librarian. By background, so.
But okay.
He was a bit ashamed to say it out loud.
Yeah.
But now you.
No, say it loud.
Thought it out. So.
Be librarian and be proud. And because I think with more dialogue between the two communities, we can overcome supposed suppose problems. For us, copyright is an enabler. It is the way, publishing, but any other creative industry can be liberated from the necessity of public patronage, can be liberated by depending on the finances of very few individuals. It's a way to make cultural production depend more or less on market conditions and competitiveness, you name it. Of course, you're not producing any kind of good. There is a higher interest in people accessing culture, same as there is a higher interest in having people access food, access housing, and that means you keep an eye on the sector, promote it, but doesn't mean that you try all the time to have legislation that undercuts the producer just because it's important for people to access. We love libraries. We think they are a natural partner for us. They are the place where a lot of people discover books, which is a great thing. We saw it, and I don't need to come here to tell you that they have a fantastic social cohesion role, which should actually be enhanced. I really don't see why we should end up being rivals. The one thing, but that honestly, as publisher, we don't think should happen, is that simply the purely financial difficulties of libraries end up on us. That is not how it should work. Libraries need more funding, libraries need more support, libraries need to be there as they were, they need to keep being there, and they need to keep working with us and possibly not be somehow put against us. That would be my bottom line. Thanks.
Grazie.
Prego.
What an interesting panel, you know, from France, Italy, and now Germany. The three big ones. So, Silke, I mean, you work so closely with these issues for a long time, and you've been also a kind of advisor to the Commission on these issues. Is there a versus, or are they? Should they be rivals, or is there a way to actually bridge the two sides?
Thank you very much, Ragnar. To say it first, I think there must be bridges. We have always had in the whole history different interests from different sides, and they got together, they talked to each other, and they found solutions. So I'm very optimistic that we should be solution-oriented anyway. But let me first thank the Estonian presidency for having me invited. It's a big pleasure for me to be back in Estonia, and on this occasion I might want, since it's the last day after an intensive conference, I would like to share with you a small anecdote from my first visit to this country, which was to the Soviet Republic of Estonia a few months before it became independent. And I was here at a seminar. I flew in by Aeroflot from Helsinki, a 10-minute flight to Tallinn, and it was an adventure in itself. And at the end, or in the evening, we were invited by our hosts into a restaurant of a hotel, which was, of course, one of the few hotels open for foreigners, because you couldn't just go anywhere. We had a little kind of booth in that hotel where we had a dinner together, and these Estonian hosts started saying, well, anyway, we are working on getting independent, and we are on a good way, and we are very confident this will happen soon. And I was shocked. I thought, well, you are listened to. I mean, there are all these little things from Moscow where everybody would listen exactly. Aren't you afraid that you're in jail tomorrow? And then the answer came, no. We are willing to do this, and we are not afraid. And this was so powerful. I was so impressed because I know what it means. I mean, my parents have been in a totalitarian, or grandparents in a totalitarian system and oppressive system, and we know what this means or may mean. And in this moment, I was sure it will happen. So I went back to Germany and told my friends, and nobody believed me from outside. And I said, it will happen in a few months, and it did happen. And I can only say congratulations. It's such a big thing. And another anecdote, a little bit earlier, I was an intern in a New York law firm where the attorney had close professional relations to some Estonians, and he showed me a video which had been smuggled out of the country, which showed one of the big song festivals which you have here. And he explained me that, I could see that after the official part, all the Estonians were still sitting or standing there and singing without moving their lips the national folklore Estonian music. So the songs, the traditional songs. And in my mind, this was unifying the people. So showing, and the power from Moscow couldn't do anything, of course, because they couldn't see who is singing, actually, because nobody moved his lips, but everybody heard it, and it was an immense effect, and it shows, I think, how culture is so important for even the identity of a people and of sticking together, of keeping who you are. And I think this was also a means for survival in a way. And this, again, was the other impressive thing, which I will never forget about Estonia, so sorry for that longer anecdote, but yeah, great experience. Okay, now to come to my point, I think I would be a little bit more specific on the topic of electronic lending or lending by online making available, because in November last year, the European Court of Justice has issued a court decision interpreting the already mentioned rental and lending directive. And I know most of you are not legal experts, so I would try to be very simple and understandable. If not, please come and ask questions. The system is so that a national court which wants to implement a national law, to interpret a national law which is based on a European harmonized directive, may, or even in the last instance must, put a question to the European Court of Justice is if the national court is convinced that it's, the solution depends on the interpretation of the underlying European law. And in that case, we had a Dutch case where the question was whether the Dutch national law on public lending right, which is what you all know, the traditional lending law, copyright law, which says that the author cannot prohibit the lending, but the library or the state behind the library has to pay a remuneration for the public lending. This law was, well, the question was whether this would also apply to the online making available of e-books to the library users. But the question was very concrete, and I have to quote from the question because it, among others, repeated what the law provides in the Netherlands. Maybe it's because it's not any kind of electronic lending, but it is was in a particular case where the library places a digital copy on the server of the library and enables a user to reproduce that copy by downloading it onto his or her own computer in such a way that that copy made by the user when downloading is no longer usable after a limited period. So you have this automatic technical self-destruction device, which makes it comparable in a way to analog lending where you have to bring back the book after some time. The other condition is also that this happens in such a way that other users cannot download the copy from the library onto their computers during that period. And also that is, of course, kind of a mirroring the analog situation where if the library has given out its, let's say, only copy of a particular book to one user, it cannot at the same time give the same book to another user. So you can see this was kind of constructed in a way that it would really mirror the analog world. And I think this question, as it was put, already also kind of wanted to seduce the court to say, well, that's the same, and also the electronic lending in this case applies, which in the end the court also did. I will not mention all the arguments, the legal arguments which the court made in interpreting the European lending right provisions. I personally, and I'm not alone as a legal expert, would say, well, it was not the right way of legally arguing. I would have a counter-argument on each of the arguments of the court. Even we have had similar German lowercase court decisions on e-book sales, which is similar in a way because it's also, distribution. Where the courts said, well, this is not distribution, and distribution rental lending is the same family, so to say, but it is an online making available. It's a communication to the public which is regulated in the Information Society Directive and has other rules to follow. So any legal expert would not agree with the arguments of the court, but we have the result now. That under these particular circumstances, as were mentioned in the case which I just mentioned to you, the court said it cannot be ruled out that the lending directive may apply where this e-lending has the essentially similar characteristics to the lending in the analog world. So what does this mean? It's always difficult to understand what the court really says, because also the court didn't have to judge on the Information Society Directive. If you would have asked the court, is that way of making available a communication to the public and making available in the meaning of the Information Society Directive, it might have said, yes, it is, because it's non-tangible, it is online, and that's what is actually traditionally covered by the making available right in the Information Society Directive. So it always depends also on how you put the question to the court. Anyway, what does it mean, the judgment for us? I think that, the lending directive says the legislator of the member states has the choice either to choose an exclusive lending right, which means the author has the right to prohibit or to license the lending, in this case the e-lending. And if he wants to make an exception or derogation, he must at least provide a remuneration. And the court said, well, under these conditions which I mentioned, also the e-lending could be covered by this possibility to provide for an exception from the exclusive right, and instead of making it possible for libraries to lend electronically books against the remuneration. So it is still a matter of the national legislator to decide what to do. And if so, it cannot provide for a broad, unspecified derogation from the exclusive right, but has to specify either the conditions which were subject to this case or at least very similar conditions. I believe that the legally correct way would have been to say, well, it's covered by the exclusive right of making available, so you would be like in our system. It would not create confusion from a legal point of view. And then it is still would have been the task of the European legislator to consider whether it wants to introduce under what conditions an exception for the electronic lending, which is a political and question to be debated, and that's also a question to everybody. This would be, what would be the effects? I think one has to ask what would be the effects of such a solution on the book market, on everybody. That's not always easy to say. What role plays the technical protection measure? What happens if, as it is often possible today, someone can break this DRM, which is the self-destructing DRM, so that in the end, every user would have the book. If he destroys the self-destructing thing, he would have it forever. He doesn't need to buy a book anymore. So all these are open questions which need to be debated, I think. That's
okay. Before I follow up what you said, we now looked more from the library's point of view, but this issue is also relevant to other sectors as well. So I would like to maybe take some either questions or your comments or something that you really think that we need to cover in the next half an hour discussion. So anyone? Wow, there's such a sea of...
I'll be very Latvian. Yes, I'll like to go back to the couple of concepts mentioned during the last 2 days. One is Culture 3.0, where it was actually explicitly mentioned that the concept is that we are already moving past the Culture 2.0, which is largely copyright-based. And also, I would like to go back, which was discussed in the last panel about business models. So I think the copyright in general, so if we are moving away a bit from the problems which are now at hand, so the things which are discussed in the Commission and then Council and Parliament about the copyright reform, I think if we take a longer look, I think this is essentially a discussion should be not about copyright, but about the business model, how we fulfill the promise of copyright to ensure that authors who see that they are in a business of creating new works, how can they earn the money? And I'm all for it. So I'm also an author, a bit, slightly. And so, yeah, I would like to earn some money with the creative work I've been doing. But I think it goes a bit in the wrong direction, in the sense that, well, as it was mentioned in the very first presentation by Professor Sacco. So there is really a very blurred line now, who is an author, who is a user, who is a remixer. And I guess that's a lot of people who are creators nowadays in the cultural 3.0 concept, while they probably don't care too much, so remuneration or whatever, they don't really see them as authors in the traditional meaning. So, I mean, the authors who are really interested to earn their living as an author, by all means, we should find a way to protect their work. But let there be a clear line, so where does it start and where does it end? And I think the current copyright concept, well, it's hundreds of years old, so 150 if we go the Berne Convention. So it really works with more and more difficulty in the modern era. So yeah, by all means, there could be another way. I don't know.
Thank you. Any other hands? Yes, here in the Ulla, here, the first row.
I was in a bookshop a couple weeks ago, and I found a little book by Munari, Little Yellow Riding Hood. And the question that I'd like to ask you is, how are you going to reform? How should we reform copyright law to support a remix culture? Mm-hmm. And remix culture is really all about creativity. It's fundamental for the cultural heritage institutions to be able to protect the objects, the spaces, the cultural heritage that they manage. Similarly, we need to protect the rights of authors. But we really have seen the amazing power of remix culture, and we need some reforms to make sure that we can support that. So each of you could make one suggestion of a reform that would support remix culture to copyright, that would be great.
Very, very good. More? Anyone?
Yeah, from the physical cultural heritage side, a question which we've been facing recently. How would you advise us to act? You know, craft beer is very popular in Estonia. You obviously witnessed that last night. And there are a couple of small breweries lately that have been using heritage sites on their labels, especially churches, parish churches, on their beer bottle labels. Well, the congregation obviously is not very happy, but as the site itself, the building itself, is not a protected or copyrighted element or an object, then there is no legal argument against using that. But I mean, there is a certain ethical scene to that and other questions, but still, what would you advise them to do? How to protect their cultural heritage from being stretched too far on products?
Aitäh. One or two more questions or comments that would help us to frame the next discussion. Anyone? Oh, there's one, yes?
Maybe a little comment. Wait for the microphone, I can talk very loud.
For the translation, we need the microphone.
And then many more translations will be needed.
Epo, we can also in Estonian.
Okay.
That's Spanish.
Yeah, no, it's Esperanto 3.6. I was very much involved in the case of the Dutch copyright thing to the lending right for libraries, and the Dutch took the forefront of it. What happened in the Netherlands at this time is that the libraries are the #1 e-book accelerator. If you, for example, libraries lend out more 6 million copies. We're in total in the Netherlands, and about 4 million are done by libraries. That means that the private part in the Netherlands, that's for example BOL or Kobo, has a lesser market. And the idea is, I was very in favor of this lending right, because I think a library should be having access to all these things, because not everyone can pay. That was the old reason why the libraries were there. But what we see is that the development in the private part of trying to innovate or getting better, it's slowing down. And it's difficult. Libraries are paying in the Netherlands for these lending rights, these e-lending rights, but not as much as done by buyers or even people who have this so-called all-you-can-read model. And it's strange, because I'm in the middle of this discussion. I'm one of the guys trying to do this, and I can see clearly that copyright is something what we say to talk about, and but you can see also the balance, that difference between the public and the private part. And I always have learned that private companies, I have a private foundation, no subsidiary in it, that's going in 12 million euros, but we can move things. And libraries can move things also, but on a lesser and a different stadium. And I think it's very interesting to talk about the balance between this private and this public fight around copyrights. Am I clear? Okay.
Väga selge. Was there one more comment? Anyone? Yes, here. You know, that's persistence. If you ask, enough times, there will be hands.
Yeah, well, I'm an Estonian, so it takes time, and I'm kind of reluctant to speak publicly as a former journalist. So, in Estonia currently, we have been working for 3 years or something like that on some copyright issues to be solved. For example, one issue that is actually quite urgent across the Europe is freedom of panorama. I mean, most people even don't think about the everyday practice that if you go walk around in a city and take pictures, then actually you might be infringing copyright. If you take a picture of the museum building here and put it on Facebook, then you are already using an architect's work, and you are enabling Facebook company to earn money by that. Therefore, you might actually be legally responsible as a user. Some countries
so please delete all the photos of this building
also
before you leave the room.
If you haven't paid notice to it, then the inside of the building is the work of interior architects. Be careful where you tread. So this is just one issue that most people don't think about, but it is very important in some contexts. For example, for Wikipedians who try at least to be legally very, very correct if ever they can. And if you really cannot spread pictures of public space, the public art, houses, sculptures, graffiti, then, well, it's a problem. We have been trying to solve it in Estonia. The draft bill is currently in the Parliament's Cultural Committee. And, well, we'll see the results. But during that discussion, we have talked to many authors, author societies, and that has brought forth some very interesting, well, we could say conflicts of interest. I mean, if we take the Culture 2.0 model, then it has traditionally been the situation that between the author and the user or the audience, there are at least two intermediaries. First, when an author makes a work, then before it gets to the audience, there has to be a distributor, a publisher, somebody making a web platform, whatever, really. On the other hand, when the user buys it, then there will be the collective society representing the author's rights. Mm-hmm. Now, when we are in the Culture 3.0 environment, then the users and the authors mix. Yes, of course, the remix has been in the heart of culture for really thousands of years already, of course. But this current model does not fit the laws very well, because the laws are designed according to the 2.0. And currently already there are, well, as the copyright in the continental Europe at least has originally been meant for protecting the authors, currently there is more and more stress in giving specific copyrights to the distributors who actually do not create new works. They are just enabling the authors to reach the audience, which is actually becoming less and less important, because nowadays the authors can reach the audiences directly. There are, for example, musicians who successfully spread their own music, and the audiences, on the other hand, are giving money to them directly. They don't need the collective society. They don't need the distributor.
Okay.
That much.
So this basically relates. Yeah. So this relates to also the question of the previous questions, and also here in the mixing culture. So
and
if we could,
in certain situations, actually, as we have seen, the interests of the representatives or the distributors and the authors themselves are at cross. Mm-hmm. For example, when we talk to the architects unions in Estonia about freedom of panorama, they said they are for it, because the architects actually are interested in their works being known. The main issue for them is actually attribution. They say that the worst that can happen is that when a new building is opened, everybody thanks the builders, nobody mentions the architect. Come on, that's not the way. But they are more interested in their works being shown freely, than collecting the imaginative money from the people showing their work on Facebook.
Okay. We will now take these questions, and I will come back to the panel, okay? As we hear, it's a kind of a same story going around. And yes, yesterday we started with this 3.0 concept, and it's clear that the border between who is a creator and who is a user is blurred, more blurred than ever before. The mixing culture, as was mentioned by Seamus. How do, Silke, how the current developments in the copyright discussions take care of these issues? Do they at all?
Well, of course, there has been some discussion, but it's not in the focus. I mean, it seems that, first of all, one has to say not everything is remixing culture. I mean, there's probably still a smaller percentage of all overall creation. So one shouldn't forget that we are still basically in the traditional way of creation for the majority of creations. So one shouldn't kind of totally change the existing rules, because in that area they make sense. For the special case of remixing, I heard that where it happens, especially in the musical field, for example, the DJs, etc., that it's like a code of conduct between themselves, that they would usually recognize that everybody wants to do it, and that those whose works are being used then accept that theirs are being also used. It's more on a basis of agreement, I think, or non-complaining, so that the problems through legal complaints are not really so visible, so it doesn't come up so high.
So if you say that this issue is not in the focus for the European development, so what is the one or two key issues that Europe now tries to solve, if that's not the issue?
Well, as we've seen in the Commission proposal, I mean, different limitations to protection often works, not often, the out-of-commerce works, certain text and data mining, and these exceptions for education, research, and so on. We have the preservation limitation already mentioned. This is a choice of things which are on the table now, but at national level there may be other. It's always about the balancing, again, adapting to the new technologies. But I think also one has to always leave some time to the practice to develop. That's also getting back to the question on e-lending and mentioning business models, because it's not always good if the legislator comes in right away. He should see how the market develops. Publishers want to see how can they make money in the e-lending area. What can they do in order to still give licenses to make it possible to libraries to lend this to users? What is the demand? And you need some time to try out, of trial and error, to try out where could be a market, where could you find a right balance, and then you may not even need new legislation. One should, I think, not rush into something where the ground is not yet clear. There's still a lot of experimenting going on.
But it's interesting that you mentioned the word rushing, because often in the heritage, especially in libraries and museums, the feeling is other way around, that the discussions and negotiations in the fields of copyright take such a long time because of the EU level, that basically you're always dealing with past. You don't even look at the future. You don't create conditions for the future development. We're trying to sort out some of the issues that by the time they are sorted out, they're already, maybe not so important anymore.
That's what I wanted to say, actually, that people are doing things and they are much more advanced than the legislation. So I think the legislation needs to adapt to what people are doing in protecting also the rights of authors. We have never mentioned the fact that copyright should be removed and it should not exist. But the fact is that actually there is a strong grassroots movement of people that are learning by doing and wants to do more stuff, and actually the digital tools are there. And we are working in an environment where there are no border or less border anymore, but the mindset of the Commission and the Member State is still pretty much bound by the national borders. So when we are pushing from a library's perspective to further work across borders and work in networks with other libraries in other countries, we also reflect on the way people are working with other people throughout, the borders. And we would like to bridge that gap. And to answer a little bit to the question about the remix culture, I think that there are options in Creative Commons and in different kind of license that are not for commercial purposes or that are for sharing, and you can find alternatives to solutions to the copyright one. I believe that actually we have been taking this issue from the wrong lens of the telescope, and we are always looking at people as evil, or they will do evil things, or we are looking at the way from an infringing point of view, whether we should look at the other way around and look where bringing trust. We were talking this morning about trust and how libraries are trusted space and we need to trust the people, etc. And maybe there should be more work towards this trust and building trust with the European population. That might be a part of the equation.
Mm-hmm. Enrico, you mentioned something in your introduction that I think from my experience explains often this conflict between the two sides. And you said that basically financial difficulties of libraries, or let's say the state side financing, should not be placed on the shoulders of the publishers, or let's say on the authors. So is this really the core of the problem? But because if a person here in Estonia or many other places goes to the library and is expecting a free access to the cultural content, but is unable to watch or to lend any films because it's not available for, I don't know, half a year, or even more, then he blames the library, or the state, and the author blames the government not being able to pay. Right. So is the money the real issue here?
Well, it is an issue, as in it's like it or not, the way we actually, it's not what makes us live, because actually money is maybe the only thing that is really useless inherently, but it's the thing through which we get a lot of useful things. So it's not the only, of course, issue. But if we take it, for example, from the point of view of access, which, like mere access, which should be the aim for everyone, then you do have access. Publishers, for example, in the name themselves, they have the aim to publish, so to make stuff public, to give stuff to people. The thing is, they do it through a business model that requires, on the other hand, to get this damn money in exchange so that they can pay the authors and keep the cycle going, which means that is how we get to publish more than 500,000 titles per year, through this exchange, like it or not. So access is there, including to ebooks. Not all ebooks have been digitized yet. Again, there's an issue of does it make sense economically, but most of the time you want an ebook, you go to an ebook store and you'll have access. So what's the difference here? We want access for free, or is it? I'm not sure. Is that the goal of the library, to give access for free to things, or is it to find a more social, let's say, way of giving access, but still respecting the business model of who's trying to make a living of that? And in this, I'm perfectly in line with Eppo. There is a concrete risk to hamper private initiative, but I also agree with all this, and that's what I always say. Let's keep this clear. If someone wants to make a living out of their creation, respect that. If someone wants to find a different way, give them a different way. We don't want to make money on the work of people who don't want to make money out of it. That's parasitism. But on the other hand, we also don't want to be subject to parasitism from people who just want everything for free. So yeah, money is one part of the problem, but then we need to ask, is the idea really, like, is the only aspect that this has to be for free, or can we find a different kind of service for the different kind of stakeholders on the scene?
Maybe I can just react on that, because actually libraries spend about 5 billion euros a year on buying content. So we pay the content and we pay the remuneration to authors. So we provide the accesses for free, but what we provide, the content we provide, is not for free originally. So, and I believe that if there would be people wants to buy an ebook or access to an ebook through a special bookshops online, it can access to the all offer on the market. When it goes to the library, it will have access to a part of the market that the library has selected. But the current situation that we have now is that the offer that we can provide to our users is very limited compared to what is on the market, because libraries are not able to select, doesn't have the right to select the title that it wants. So we don't provide things for free completely. We pay for the content we provide.
Mm-hmm. Looking at the time, I'm closing that circle, but you gave an overview of what's on the table for the Commission, and you also brought with your example of the Dutch case kind of a steps on how this understanding of the copyright framework is being shaped, even by these kind of very specific cases. Let's jump now to 10 years in the future. So a little time machine exercise, and they have not been prepared for this, so it's not scripted. So where do you think? So let's not think about the nitty-gritty of what's happening at the moment, what's on the table, what's the question in the court. 10, 15 years from now, what do you think will be or should be in the kind of a legal framework that would enable, that would facilitate the kind of future of culture 3, 4, or 5.0, not inhibit and not limit the development? And Silke.
Maybe as a procedure, I think we should care to bring together the different opponents, so to say, who have different interests, like, for example, libraries, museums on the one hand, and authors, other right owners on the other hand, and really constructively to try to find solutions, to speak to each other, and not to kind of see the other one as the opponent and the enemy or so, because this does not lead us to good solutions. I think the way to come to the best solutions for everyone is really to cooperate. And I think on the ground, if you stay on the ground and really say concretely, what are our challenges, what would we like to have, what is possible, what other solutions, maybe even outside of copyright, would be possible. We have spoken of funding. If, for example, a national government cares for having good provision, supply of culture to their own citizens, well, it means maybe they should afford more money or supply more money to libraries. So everything is interrelated, and one should look at all the different aspects in the infrastructure, in the politics, and the most important thing, talk to each other and try to find the best possible solutions. There's never the ideal solution for everybody.
I fully agree, and they should also, I wish we could see, legislators take seriously the fact that culture does have a special place. It has a special place in national legislation. It has a special place in EU legislation, and I'd like that to be really taken seriously, so that culture is not the first, and education are not the first areas where you cut whenever there is a problem. That's not a way to take seriously the special place of culture.
And so in 10 years' time, I expect that there will be further harmonization of the legal framework for education and culture, so that all the exceptions that are actually left to the member states are more uniform at the European level, and so that we can exchange cross-border information much more easily, that we can also end up with a European library, because we don't have something like a European library yet, and we don't have a network of European libraries. We always have libraries that are bound by their national borders, and they cooperate with other across borders. But we should move towards a more, integrated European Union in the matter of culture and education.
Mm-hmm. Good. Look at this.
We didn't reply to the question on
craft beer.
Craft
Yeah,
beer.
exactly.
Craft beer.
This is a question you need to, try out. I think we can do this over craft beer. No, Enrico, do you have an answer to the craft beer?
No, I hope someone else has one.
I have a suggestion.
Yes, please.
Because I've been working also on indigenous cultures, which are also not protected by copyright, or something similar usually. And what they do sometimes, the indigenous peoples overall in the world, if someone uses their even their names or their, like the Maori names or something like that, and they don't like it for whatever, for cultural reasons, for feeling offended or so, they would talk to the enterprise, like the craft beer producer, and say, well, we have a problem, and this is hurting us and our people and our culture, and we feel offended or whatever, and couldn't you please change that image and not take ours? Otherwise, they could make a big press campaign. So it's really on a non-legal level that they would really go to the public and say, well, they don't behave nicely to us, and so bad publicity for a company who wants to sell something is always bad. So this is a pragmatic approach.
So you're saying that they should boycott drinking that beer? It's such a good beer. It's very difficult to do.
Unless it has a different label or doesn't show this church. So.
Very good. Thank you for my panelists. Let's give a round of applause to you. Yes, you can leave the stage, but before we go, I would like to ask Marilyn to come here, and Raivo to come here as well, and Yvette to come here. Is Harry here as well somewhere? Harry? Ah, he's gone. Okay, that's fine. Craft beer, probably. Very good. Come here. We have these microphones. We have these microphones as well. So, yeah, just one. So, oh yes, here it is. So, the best way to shut up a person is to make him moderator. Because the good moderator, should not, talk too much, which is not very good moderator in this case, but, shouldn't really be saying what they think. And, there were more of us, but, we've been for the last 2 days in the work group and, here in the panels, been moderating you and have to listen to you and try to keep our thoughts. So we thought that just before we finish, we make you listen us. So our takeaways from these 2 days. What did we learn? And what are the questions that will keep ticking in our head, 2 hours back to Tallinn? And something we would like to take away for the next meetings of this sort, and something that will keep us, push us to go further with this topic. Yvette, your general impressions of these 2 days?
Well, there's lots of levels. Personal level.
Why this? It is just switched off. Where is it? Oh, here it is. Okay.
There's a lot of levels. Personal level, personal private level. It was great to see old friends and make new friends. A wonderful venue, lovely hotel, widget factory. Very, very good things that will stay in my mind. On a personal, professional level, it was really lovely to see this issue taken on by the minister and by the Estonian presidency, which felt that a lot of work that a lot of good people have been doing is validated. On my own professional level, it was very good to see a kind of validation of our report, that the issues that we identified were being repeated through the day. Yesterday particularly, issues about the recalibration of institutions, the reallocation of resources, the notion of risk-taking, looking much more at people-orientated policies, the importance of diversity and so on. And all these things that kept repeating made me feel that we were actually in the same ballpark anyway. It was great to have inspirational speakers, the framing through Professor Sacco of the 3.0. I was very personally interested in the European Heritage label, which again was very people-orientated. It brought up some really difficult questions about whose history. Somebody talking about learning history through German, Russian and Polish and it all being different. How do you look at the recent histories and do them justice, and whose justice are you doing them? I thought these were really fascinating intellectual challenges that I enjoyed. In our workshop, it was great to see the focus again on heritage and museums as being about citizenship, about being about democracy and well-being. Mina continued that in her talk. And particularly discussion about value and where value lies. The complex issues of value, when we looked at things like ancestry, that the value there is in the aggregated data, not in the front end, and how that actually spills over into our latest discussion about remix and remuneration for value. I loved hearing Jonas just talking about his work, and I would just say that it would have been even better, and it's hard to say this, but it would have been even better to have more younger, diverse entrepreneurs' voices, because that for me was just a great inspiration.
Yvette, if there would be one question that you want the people living here not to forget, and maybe to kind of put forward for the next meetings, what would it be? What's the key question?
I think it's about radical rethink. And be brave, be bold, and really look at this landscape as being one that is... don't be fearful of change. And how are we going to do that?
Marilyn, you helped, we did such a detailed work looking at the flow of the speeches and flow of the ideas here. But, you are a practitioner yourself. You're the director of a museum which is going through that rethink at the moment. Maybe the foreigners in the room do not know, but there's big changes happening in the Museum of Occupations, even from the point of view of the name and the visuals and the concept. And your visitor numbers have gone up now in the past 1 or 2 years, and 3 times or even more. So there's a big work that you're doing. How, for you, the kind of the theoretical concept of moving from culture 2.0 to 3.0 is constituted in your practical work?
Very good question, and you described...
Yeah, it works.
Okay, good. And you described it quite well, and indeed this was the context how I listened and analyzed what was said. On the one hand side, it of course confirmed that we are on the right way. This is where the theory is going as well. We try to do what has been people have been talking here, and most of the people who have been presenting their ideas. But then again, in the practice level, you have so many conflicts around it. You have so many problems around it. For example, the note from the Professor Sacco's presentation, how to include everybody means actually a lot of conflicts, a lot of discussions. It means a lot of opinions, and these opinions are almost never exactly the same. You have groups who want to have one thing and other groups who want to have an opposite thing. So actually it sounds very optimistic, and I also believe that the European museums have potential to become leaders while we talk about cultural heritage 3.0, because our communities are very strong and we have so much more sense of community here than maybe in some other places where societies are more kind of individualistic. But then on the other hand, hand side, I think it is very needed to also change the mindset of the people in the museums as well as around, and mindset in the sense that museum is not a safe place anymore. Working in a museum or being a team member in a museum, it doesn't mean anymore that you're doing only nice things and everybody like you and thank you and everybody is happy about that, because to create the change always means opposition as well. There wouldn't be no change with difficult times or opposition. And this is what we face every day in our museum as well, while we're going through changes at the moment. And then you start to think that this discussion is good. In democratic society, we need this kind of discussion. We need people who oppose. We need these people who are really against about your ideas. Just one example, for the ones who don't know the context, last year we opened the exhibition that talked about how gay people were repressed during Soviet Union time. And you can imagine how much opposition there was just touching the word gay already in our museum, with our museum context. But on the other hand side, there were also communities, especially the gay community, who were, the exhibition was made by them. It was an artistic exhibition made by them, and it was the only and first exhibition that touched it was illegal to be a gay during Soviet Union time. It was the first exhibition that actually touched this issue. It was a very difficult exhibition, but on the other hand side, in Estonia, there was, at the moment, there still isn't no academics, almost no people who have touched these questions. And I think museums can be a role, kind of front runners here, role models here. But it always comes through conflict, and I saw myself how difficult it is for a team, because when you go to work, when you plan to go to work in the museum, you don't think that it will be difficult, or you will be in the media all the time, or you have to fight. When you work in a prime minister office, you probably accept it, or you think that it will be difficult, but it didn't used to be difficult in the museums before that.
Just another context for your own work, and Professor Sakar talking about engaging people in this process. This was it's a private museum that you're running, and it is a museum of occupations. So when the new concept was elaborated and the kind of a new conceptual idea around it, then one of the cornerstones of that change was changing in name from Museum of Occupations to Museum of Freedom. It's a very conceptual change. So we're not talking about it only from the point of view of being victim, but the end of it. Now, it started such a huge conflict in the society. Now the question is, how did you solve it? How did you solve it?
I think solve is not the...
And are you going to be a Museum of Occupations, Museum of Freedom?
At the moment, we have decided to become a museum of occupations and freedom, because the initial idea was never about the name. The initial idea, our permanent exhibition is 15 years old. So the initial idea of the conception, changing the conception, was to have a new exhibition. And at the moment, we are the object museum. We have artifacts, about 500 artifacts behind the glass, artifacts from the Soviet Union time, and there's almost no description next to the artifacts. But when we look the 40,000 artifacts that are in our collection, they all have really, really moving stories behind them. So the initial idea was to change the exhibition, because now in Estonia we have already generations growing up who don't have any idea of the Soviet Union time, or repressions, or deportations, or the Great Escape and all these topics. So now there's no point of having these old objects behind the glass anymore, because people don't understand what kind of objects they are or what kind of meaning they have. And so the idea was to change the exhibition and cover 4 topics occupations, resistance, but also recovery and freedom, to show how we came out of this area, what we learned from that, how to value freedom today. So what we wanted to do is to include kind of freedom and recovery as themes and add these to the story. Still, the exhibition will focus and mostly on the occupations period, but the line there would be that people will understand and value freedom more through going that. So the name question for us was never like the big question or prepared question. So it was very difficult when the society started to discuss about that. And then we still want to provide the recovery and freedom stories. So the Museum of Occupations and Freedom was a solution, because what I think the whole team of us also learned through this process, and what I personally believe, is that you also can't be angry on the people who want to tell the story, the narrative of suffering, who still carry the victim, the story of narrative of suffering, and the kind of victim identity are selective and limiting, and there's many other problems with them. But you have to understand why they carry this identity, what they have gone through, why they have that kind of attitudes. You have to understand these people, and it's, I think, very, very important.
Thank you for being with us over the 2 days. Raivo.
Thank you.
What do you think?
This was a very interesting conference, as you should say, but it was so full of so many ideas. I think everybody has lots of, a whole inventory of things to start doing on their job on Monday, let's say, not tomorrow, on Friday yet, but you go back to your work and think, oh, we should think of this and that and third. From the point of view of libraries, I think libraries is a sector where we've seen how punters or patrons are voting with their feet most clearly. They simply do not come. And libraries have invented lots of interesting new ways how to bring people back to the libraries. But there is still that barrier of, you can bring the horse to the water, but it has to read the book himself or itself. So we can bring people to the library, but we can't always make them read there. They do other things. So I think there's lots of takeaways from this conference for how to begin to help people make sense of what is in the library, how to provide better meaning of the content that we hold for them, and how to engage on that social level with them. I think for me, from today's discussions, it was also the business models that are so amazingly successful on the aggregate level. That is something that suspected always, but I never really put that much faith in it. But now that several people have, provided figures and proof to this, I think this is something I would definitely have to look more into and plan for the future.
Raivo, yesterday in our group, we talked about innovation. We talked about what is innovative, institutions or cultural heritage, what is innovation in cultural heritage, and how to achieve that. And when we had listed everything, he was the devil's advocate in the corner, and he said, wait, if you look at that list, and this is a good list, you said, it was the same list 15 years ago. So why are we still 15 years later looking at the same list? So I don't want you to repeat that question now here, but put it in a positive way. What to do that in 15 years we would not look at the same kind of list and think, wow, this is something we should do.
So what positive movements should this conference start now, that we will, look back in 15 years' time and say, that was in Tartu when we first started.
Well, if people would remember that they've been to Tartu, I think that's already a big thing.
I think there's two things, practical takeaways that I've already agreed on with Harry mostly. First is to do with these performance indicators. On a personal level, I'm really glad that we are now finally able to move forward from those monetary indicators and those methods that produce the same results of 4 to 5 currency units per one in every country and on every continent. The contingent valuation method seems to be not really working well for everyone. So we need to do more work on those performance indicators on the social plane, or how we're engaging with communities. And if we're setting things into motion, like Harry's workshop coming up in October, I think that's a great thing to bring about a change that would make us think differently about things in 15 years' time. Another practical thing is just during the coffee break, we founded a task force that will look into blockchain technology for cultural heritage. Everyone is welcome to join. Contact Harry for that, or myself. So we'll see future in that technology as well.
Very good. It's such a pleasure to do this with people like this. So thank you for being here. Let me stand up for this. Throughout 2 days, a miracle has been happening in the corners of the site. You've probably seen it from a corner of your eye, and you've seen the first results out in the lobby. And Colin, we are not surprised by this, because we know very well the work that Colin is doing. I hope it was interesting for you as well, that it's not been only work, but it has been a pleasure for you as well. Now, we invite you all to go to these pieces of art, to take photos. We are going to take a lot of photos of them. We are going to share them. These will remain as graphic notes from these 2 days here in Estonia, in the ministry. We're going to put them up on the walls, and because this is it's a piece of art. It's co-creation with you, and actually some of you will find your own pictures and small people there. So go and do this, I recommend. So thank you, Colin, for this work, and this is not over yet. Before I'm going to say the last words here, let me just say a few organizational details. The first thing is that now we are going to have lunch, networking lunch. Take your time before people leave. There will be today 2 buses to go to Tallinn. One is at 2 o'clock, and one is 5:15. This is for those that come back from the optional tours. So at 2 o'clock, you know who you are, and if you really need to be on 2 o'clock bus, just put your name down and be ready at 2 o'clock. Rest, we go for a tours, and we come back here at 5, and the buses will be taking you away. There will be 4 trips planned. One group is going to stay here. You're going to get a guided tour, really good and in-depth guided tour of the National Museum. And it's really amazing journey, so good choice. National Archives of Estonia, the new building. Really, this is something that we are very proud of. This is one of the latest, the brand new building, with not only the building and the rooms and the facilities to keep our archives, but also the laboratories for research and restoration of artifacts. So this is really an amazing place. That's the second group. The third one is Tartu Center for Creative Industries. It's how cultural and creative industries, heritage, creativity, business can be merged into one. It's a group of buildings with a lot of entrepreneurs waiting for us. So we will get a tour there, and I'm going there myself. So if you're interested, you can join that group. And then the European Heritage Label people in this room, you will go to the guided tour to the Historic Ensemble of University of Tartu, my own alma mater. So it's an amazing tour. And if you are not from the group, but you want to join that guided tour, you're welcome to join as well. So all the information is also outside. If you don't know where to go, you can still pick, you can change, but just make sure you're telling us in the information desk and be on the right bus or right place. So that's it about logistics. Well, the very last thing I would like to say is that because we are leaving the room now and we're not going to meet back, I would like to thank the people that made this 2 days possible. So firstly, we can do the best here, we can try our best, but these people that really make this an unforgettable experience are usually those that are behind the scenes, and this time physically, I mean behind the trees, behind the screens, behind the windows, and hidden away. So let's make a big round of applause to all the technicians, the light engineers, the sound engineers, everyone who's behind the cameras and made this possible. So. And having been to more than 10 presidency conferences, I don't remember a conference where there wasn't, technical hiccup of something doesn't working or something. So it went very smoothly, and except the accreditation system, but it was not your fault, okay? The second group of people I would like to thank are all the translators that have been doing work up there in the top corner for 2 days. So thank you very much for all your translation. And then amazing group of people that have been organizing this event. From the Ministry of Culture, yesterday, the party, all the little details, the designers, the people that came up with the coffee break areas, the baristas giving you coffee, and all these people that really have designed this experience for you. So if you're in this room, please could you stand up as well, Ulla, Miriam and all the others. Yes. Yeah. There's so many more of them, but they are still working now just to make sure that all the logistics are in place. So you are really the heart and soul of making this happen. Then all the speakers, facilitators, people that have contributed with their ideas to make this successful conference. So thank you, and thank you all who are still sitting here. So big round of applause. And finally, the most important part of any conference, and that's you. The worst scenario for any conference organizer is to find themselves in the end of the conference, the second day, with 20 people sitting scarcely in the room. So the fact that you're still here and the room is almost full is really the clearest testament that this has been a success. So thank you all for being here. And thank you for putting up the Estonian peculiarities. Our sense of humor, we are slow, as you know, but now you maybe got in these 2 days know us a bit more. So that's how we are, and it was really great to welcome you here in Tartu, in Estonia. I hope you have some time in Tallinn as well, and if not, please to come back. Thank you very much, and the lunch is waiting.
And let's applause to Ragnar as well. He really did it with the soul and heart.
That's it.